What if the most profound narrative ever shared harbored an astonishing omission? Nearly 2 decades of its central figure's existence. The canonical Gospels, replete with meticulous accounts of miraculous feats, profound discourses, acts of betrayal, and the ultimate resurrection, exhibit a remarkable reticence regarding the extensive period stretching from Jesus' tender years to the commencement of his public ministry. This profound silence is so pervasive, so absolute, that it suggests an intentional act, as if the very ink were deliberately withheld, as if the collective memory itself had been carefully obscured. The New Testament, in its entirety, offers only 2 fleeting glimpses into Jesus' youth. Initially, we encounter the celebrated nativity stories, where celestial messengers and humble shepherds proclaim the arrival of the divine child. Following this, there is a singular, vivid episode depicting Jesus at the age of 12, engaged in a profound exchange within the Jerusalem temple, astonishing seasoned elders with his precocious wisdom and understanding. Subsequent to this captivating scene, the narrative abruptly ceases, dissolving into an 18-year chasm. The next time we behold Jesus, he is a man of approximately 30 years, standing poised on the banks of the River Jordan, anticipating baptism at the hands of John the Baptist. Nearly 2 full decades of a human life, an immense span of 18 years, thus vanish without a trace, slipping quietly into an enigmatic abyss. For any historical personage, such a significant chronological void would undoubtedly be noteworthy. However, for Jesus, whose life is widely recognized as having fundamentally reshaped the trajectory of civilizations, this protracted silence transcends mere curiosity. It is profoundly unsettling, indeed haunting. One is compelled to ponder how the pivotal years of transition from boyhood to full manhood could be entirely absent from the historical record. Was there truly no one who recalled these years? Did no chronicler deem them worthy of inscription? Or, alternatively, were such narratives once committed to writing, only to be subsequently lost to time or deliberately concealed? Some academic scholars propose that this omission is purely pragmatic, arguing that the Gospel authors simply did not perceive those particular years as relevant to their overarching theological objectives. Nevertheless, this absence does not feel accidental or peripheral. Rather, it evokes the sensation of a vital page torn from a precious manuscript before its contents could ever be fully absorbed. The sheer magnitude of those formative years, a period typically dedicated to the shaping of one's spiritual essence, the acquisition of knowledge, and the rigorous honing of personal character, renders their absence profoundly weighty, almost oppressively so. These missing years stand like a perpetually locked chamber within a familiar dwelling, its entrance always visible yet never yielding to entry. One is naturally drawn to contemplate what experiences those years might have encompassed. Traversing the crucial developmental stage from adolescence to mature adulthood, Jesus would undoubtedly have confronted the common tribulations of identity formation, familial obligations, and personal responsibility. He might have toiled assiduously in Joseph's carpentry workshop, meticulously shaping robust beams of cedar and olive wood into agricultural implements or household furnishings. He could have traversed the sun-drenched, dusty hillsides of Galilee, keenly observing the cyclical rhythms of sowing and harvesting, gleaning profound lessons from the natural world as readily as from human interaction. Furthermore, he might have diligently pursued studies within the local synagogue, committing the sacred Torah to memory and wrestling intellectually with the stern, evocative poetry of the ancient prophets. Yet, despite these plausible and universal experiences, the canonical Gospels pass over all such possibilities in absolute silence. Consequently, the human imagination invariably steps forward to bridge this narrative void. Where the factual record concludes, legend, like tenacious roots, begins to take firm hold within that very silence. Over time, people have woven intricate narratives concerning distant journeys, encounters with secret mentors, and profound, hidden spiritual revelations. Throughout the course of centuries, diverse traditions have proliferated like intertwining vines, meticulously crafting elaborate tales to span the immense gap left by scriptural brevity. Some accounts have envisioned Jesus retreating into desert solitude, absorbing esoteric wisdom from ascetic sects such as the Essenes. Others have placed him within the ancient lands of the pharaohs, assimilating the timeless knowledge embedded within Egypt's long historical memory. Still others have propelled him even further eastward, traversing formidable mountains and winding rivers into the very heart of India or beyond, where he might have encountered venerable sages representing entirely different spiritual traditions. The sheer absence of verifiable fact thus becomes an exceptionally fertile ground for speculative thought, and such speculation, when reiterated consistently over extended periods, gradually assumes the authoritative mantle of its own distinctive tradition. In the vibrant tapestry of medieval Europe, wandering troubadours recounted stories of Jesus journeying alongside itinerant traders. Within the secluded valleys of the majestic Himalayas, local folklore spoke of a saintly figure whose teachings bore striking resemblances to those attributed to Christ. Across the misty shores of Britain, legends emerged, detailing a young child who arrived with Joseph of Arimathea at the mystical site of Glastonbury. All these disparate and often contradictory narratives, despite their inconsistencies, nevertheless share one profoundly haunting recognition: a palpable sense that something fundamental is conspicuously absent. This missingness is not merely a historical lacuna. It resonates on an existential level. It compels us to confront the deeper question of how much of any individual life remains ultimately unrecorded. How many of our own personal chapters silently vanish into oblivion, remembered by no one save ourselves. The lost years of Jesus thus serve as a poignant mirror, reflecting the lost years of humanity at large. The countless lives that pass unnoted by formal chronicles, the unspoken seasons of personal growth and transformation that shape us in ways no historian could ever fully capture. Yet, the profound silence enveloping Jesus' formative years feels distinct from ordinary historical forgetfulness. It carries an air of being carefully curated, deliberately chosen, perhaps even imbued with a sacred purpose. The early Christians meticulously transmitted their Gospels, carefully selecting and preserving only what they deemed absolutely essential for their nascent faith. The very fact that they left this significant chronological gap entirely untouched strongly suggests a conscious editorial choice, one that continues to reverberate across 2 millennia. Perhaps those years were perceived as too mundane, too ordinary for inclusion in Holy Writ. It is also conceivable that they contained experiences deemed too complex, too potentially disruptive, or too deeply intertwined with other non-canonical traditions. Or, most profoundly, perhaps the silence itself was intended as a pedagogical tool, designed to convey that before divine revelation, there must be profound preparation. And before public ministry, there exists a period of deep mystery, a prolonged waiting, a hidden season, much like a chrysalis within which something unseen and utterly transformative quietly takes shape. One might vividly imagine those 18 years as a winding, twilight road, stretching beyond the limits of human perception. Along its unseen path, the echoes of footsteps are faint, almost entirely erased by the relentless passage of wind and time. You can almost discern their fading resonance in the distant reaches of memory. This was the silent crucible in which the prodigious boy who once astonished temple elders gradually matured into the man who would ultimately astonish and indeed transform entire empires. The silence of those years is far from empty. Rather, it hums softly, like a tautly stretched string, vibrating with a profound meaning that perpetually remains just beyond our immediate grasp. These vanishing years represent the very threshold of mystery. They serve as a potent reminder that history, much like sacred scripture, frequently reveals its deepest truths as much through what it purposefully withholds as through what it explicitly articulates. And so, we are compelled to begin our inquiry not with the illusory comfort of certainty, but rather with the profound invitation of silence, a silence that has steadfastly endured for 2 millennia, beckoning us to lean in closer, to listen intently for the elusive wisdom that resides between the lines. The Gospels are frequently regarded as among the most meticulously preserved biographical accounts in all of human history. They profoundly shape the spiritual convictions of billions, their narratives retold within the solemn grandeur of stone cathedrals, whispered in fervent prayers, immortalized in vibrant frescoes, and diligently carried into every conceivable corner of the earth. And yet, for all their celebrated detail and pervasive influence, they remain fundamentally incomplete. When one opens these sacred texts and endeavors to follow the narrative arc of Jesus' life, one inevitably confronts the sensation of stepping across a vast, unbridged canyon. On one side stands a child imbued with astonishing, precocious wisdom, while on the other, a fully grown man walks purposefully with his devoted disciples. The crucial bridge, the connective tissue between these 2 distinct shores of his life, is conspicuously absent. At the tender age of 12, the Gospels place Jesus firmly in Jerusalem. The young boy lingers within the hallowed confines of the temple, engaging in discourse with the venerable elders, astounding them with the depth of his understanding. It presents a vivid portrait of nascent brilliance, still unripe, a magnificent promise yet to be fully realized. And then, abruptly, the narrative curtain descends. The very next verse propels the story forward by nearly 2 full decades. Jesus is no longer a boy, but a mature man of approximately 30 years, quietly departing his hometown of Nazareth to embark upon his baptism in the River Jordan. In the vast expanse between these 2 moments, there is absolute silence. No recorded voice, no articulated teaching, no discernible movement across the sacred page. This profound and protracted silence has troubled both devoted believers and rigorous historians alike. In the context of an ordinary human existence, these 18 years would typically represent the period of greatest personal transformation. The child blossoms into the adult. Youthful innocence gradually yields to mature experience. Enduring friendships are forged and, sometimes broken. Essential skills are diligently acquired, and one's fundamental identity is irrevocably shaped. To omit such a significant period from the life story of any individual would render the account feeling profoundly incomplete. But for the one revered as the Messiah, this omission feels truly monumental, akin to crucial chapters deliberately torn from a book just before its climactic resolution. The Gospels themselves offer no explicit explanation for this vast lacuna. They glide over the gap without a trace of apology, as if the silence itself were deemed entirely sufficient. Some scholars contend that this narrative choice accurately reflects the underlying intention of the Gospel authors. Their primary purpose, it is argued, was not to compose a comprehensive biography, but rather to present faith narratives meticulously crafted to proclaim Jesus as the Christ, not to satisfy mere historical curiosity. Within this theological framework, the specific details of the hidden years were deemed irrelevant. What held paramount importance were the miracles he performed, his sacrificial death, and his glorious resurrection. All other details could, and indeed did, remain untold. And yet, paradoxically, what remains untold often resonates with the loudest impact. The very act of omission powerfully ignites the human imagination. One is compelled to ask, why was this substantial space deliberately left blank? Was it because those years were considered too ordinary, too mundane to merit inscription, filled solely with the sawdust and sweat of a carpenter's bench? Or was it, conversely, because they contained something far more disruptive, something too unconventional or strange to be preserved within the nascent Christian narrative? In the centuries that followed, generations of believers profoundly hungered to know more about this enigmatic period. Early church fathers, apocryphal writers, and wandering storytellers, each, in their own way, endeavored to patch over the silence. Some accounts maintained that Jesus never truly left Galilee, living a quiet, unassuming life until the moment his divine mission began. Others, venturing into more daring territory, carried him into remote deserts and across vast oceans, placing him in direct contact with forms of wisdom originating far from his Judean homeland. Each of these attempts was driven by more than a simple desire to fill a void. They also sought to address a deeper, more fundamental question. What was it that truly set Jesus apart? From precisely where did his extraordinary knowledge originate? How was it that he spoke with such unparalleled authority, delivering parables that seemed to carry echoes of cultures far beyond the immediate confines of Judea? The empty pages of the Gospels thus became akin to a reflective mirror. Each successive generation gazed into this void, and in doing so, saw its own reflection, shaping legends to align with its deepest fears, its most ardent hopes, and its perennial longing for explanation. For mystics, the profound gap suggested a period of hidden initiation, years of intensive spiritual training conducted beyond the purview of recorded history. For skeptics, it implied a process of myth-making, an ordinary youth subsequently transformed and embellished by later storytelling. For those navigating the nuanced space in between, it remained an enduring mystery, one that invited wonder and contemplation far more than it offered definitive conclusions. It is profoundly tempting to envision those lost years as a kind of secret book, perhaps once meticulously written but subsequently erased. Perhaps actual scrolls existed, fragile parchments that over time crumbled irrevocably into dust. Perhaps vivid memories persisted within vibrant oral traditions, only to be silenced by the inexorable march of time. Or perhaps, most hauntingly of all, the blankness itself was a deliberate choice. not a mere loss, but a purposeful veil, a chosen silence specifically intended to protect something profoundly significant that was not yet ready for revelation. A profound purpose underpinned the deliberate concealment of certain truths, safeguarding elements that were not yet destined for public disclosure. Envision the sacred Gospels as ancient manuscripts, their precious narratives punctuated by conspicuously absent pages. As one carefully handles these delicate scrolls, a distinct void is perceptible amidst the fragile parchment, a lacuna whose presence feels as concrete and profound as the inscribed passages themselves. The complete chronicle of events hovers tantalizingly close, yet remains perpetually out of grasp, prompting deep contemplation on whether these missing sections were ever committed to writing, or if, perhaps, the very silence constituted the intended narrative. This inherent characteristic positions the Gospels as an intriguing paradox. They boldly declare profound divine revelations, yet simultaneously omit significant biographical specifics. They elucidate timeless spiritual doctrines, but conspicuously bypass many of the earthly years of their central figure. They present humanity with an encounter with a divine Savior, while deliberately obscuring the formative journey he undertook to embody his ultimate identity. Within these enigmatic, unwritten portions, a dual sentiment of profound frustration and captivating intellectual curiosity inevitably resides. The pronounced reticence within the Gospel accounts serves as a potent reminder that historical records are inherently incomplete. Our understanding of the past is invariably assembled from disparate fragments, intricately interwoven with numerous threads that frequently remain elusive or entirely absent. These discernible blank interspaces, far from being inadvertent errors or oversights, function instead as deliberate invitations. They compellingly encourage us to engage our imagination, to cultivate a more attentive and discerning ear, and ultimately, to embrace the profound understanding that an element of mystery is an intrinsic and inseparable component of truth itself. Consider that significant span of 18 years as an extended narrative interlude, a profound stillness designed to attune the listener for the momentous events that are poised to unfold. It resembles the anticipatory intake of breath preceding a melodious composition, or the profound gloom that precedes the break of day. This very quietude functions as a profound prelude. It is conceivable that this is precisely the reason the canonical Gospels refrained from detailing those particular years. Perhaps their intention was to compel us to draw nearer, to perceive that beyond these ostensibly blank pages lay not an emptiness, but a comprehensive richness. The gradual, concealed evolution of the individual destined to profoundly transform the course of human history. As the officially recognized Gospels conclude their narrative, leaving a significant void, distinct voices begin to emerge and resonate from the periphery of historical documentation. These comprise the apocryphal texts, a body of writings deliberately excluded from the established biblical canon. These documents were occasionally condemned as heretical, at other times clandestinely venerated, and frequently consigned to oblivion amidst the accumulated dust within monastic archives. These constitute fragmented recollections, subtle murmurs of divergent theological traditions, and attenuated reverberations of existences lived beyond the prescribed confines of religious orthodoxy. It is within these very texts that the profound quietude surrounding Jesus' undocumented years begins to resonate with a vibrant hum of potential revelations and interpretations. Prominent among these early alternative accounts is the Infancy Gospel of Thomas, a distinct work not to be conflated with the more widely recognized Gospel of Thomas, which scholars generally date to the 2nd century. This particular infancy narrative endeavors to span the chronological chasm between Jesus' appearance as a young boy debating in the temple and his emergence as an adult figure approaching John at the Jordan River. Within its narratives, the youthful Jesus is depicted not merely as exceptionally precocious, but as possessing formidable, even formidable supernatural abilities, such as molding birds from clay and miraculously imbuing them with the power of flight. He is also portrayed as possessing the capacity to inflict harm upon those who provoke him, only to subsequently extend healing to those very individuals he had previously afflicted. These narratives are undeniably peculiar, at times even disquieting, meticulously crafting a portrayal of a child who embodies both divine essence and a perilous unpredictability. Despite its deliberate exclusion from the recognized scriptural canon, this text nonetheless unveils a deeply insightful truth. Even in the formative centuries of Christianity, adherents found the extensive silence surrounding Jesus' early life almost unbearable. They harbored an intense longing to comprehend the events of those undocumented years, and consequently, they populated this historical vacuum with a rich array of stories that fluctuated dynamically between genuine miraculous feats and imaginative mythical embellishments. Another compelling, albeit largely lost, document is the Gospel of the Hebrews, now accessible only through disparate quotations preserved by early ecclesiastical figures. This text furnishes a captivating, though fragmentary, insight. From these scattered remnants, it appears to depict Jesus articulating profound insights that underscore a period of significant wisdom acquisition, extensive travels, and the assimilation of esoteric knowledge extending far beyond the circumscribed framework of the canonical Gospels. Certain reverberations within these fragments intimate an influence from Jewish mystical traditions and even various Eastern philosophical doctrines, as if the original author had encountered veiled allusions to voyages undertaken far beyond the geographical confines of Judea. Subsequently, we encounter the renowned Gospel of Thomas, a distinctive compilation comprising numerous sayings purportedly uttered by Jesus, famously discovered in 1945 close to Nag Hammadi in Egypt. This remarkable text notably diverges from traditional gospel structures, containing no continuous narrative, no accounts of miraculous deeds, and no depiction of the crucifixion. Instead, it offers solely a series of utterances, each characterized by its aphoristic brevity and profound enigmatic quality. Nevertheless, a notable characteristic of certain sayings within this collection is their palpable sense of antiquity and fundamental profundity, often appearing more primordial than the refined parables recounted in the Gospels of Matthew or Luke. These particular pronouncements allude to concealed wisdom, to the omnipresence of the divine kingdom, both internally and externally, and to the process of self-discovery as the definitive route towards spiritual illumination. This raises intriguing questions. Did these expressions genuinely echo profound teachings assimilated during those undocumented years of Jesus' life? Or do they conversely represent an independent repository of memory, indicative of a divergent trajectory within the nascent Christian movement? Academic discourse on these matters persists without definitive resolution, yet the inherent mystery endures. The apocryphal literary tradition, however, was not confined exclusively to gospel narratives. The initial centuries of the Christian era witnessed the prolific emergence of a multitude of diverse writings, including, but not limited to, the Gospel of Mary, the Acts of Thomas, and the Gospel of the Ebionites, alongside numerous other texts. Certain of these texts presented Jesus within entirely novel and unfamiliar contextual frameworks, while others subtly alluded to extensive travels undertaken far beyond the geographical boundaries of Palestine. In a notable instance, the Acts of Thomas recounts the Apostle Thomas's purported voyage to India, where he propagated doctrines remarkably akin to those espoused by his spiritual mentor. This narrative prompts a fascinating conjecture. Could this account represent a vestige of an even more ancient tradition, suggesting that Jesus himself, during his concealed years, had already journeyed eastward, planting spiritual seeds that his devoted disciple would subsequently cultivate and disseminate? Furthermore, even within the venerable Jewish and Islamic theological traditions, the conspicuous silence of the canonical Gospels regarding Jesus' early life did not go unaddressed. Medieval Jewish commentaries occasionally engaged in speculative discourse concerning Jesus' formative years, sometimes depicting him as a diligent student of esoteric mystical arts, and at other times as a dissenting figure who ventured excessively into prescribed wisdom. Within the rich tapestry of Islamic narratives, the Quran itself provides fleeting glimpses of a youthful Jesus, miraculously speaking from his cradle and performing divine signs even in infancy. These accounts bearing striking resemblances to apocryphal narratives that had traversed vast distances and endured through many centuries. These diverse writings, despite their fragmented nature and occasional thematic contradictions, collectively exhibit a singular and intriguing characteristic. Their very existence is attributable to an inherent human compulsion to fill a perceived void. The extensive omissions within the gospel narratives functioned akin to a powerful magnet, inexorably attracting a profusion of legends, speculative theories, and imaginative conjectures. Consequently, each distinct community, finding the historical lacuna intolerable, meticulously crafted its own elaborate narrative tapestry to obscure this significant informational chasm. Nonetheless, if one approaches these apocryphal texts not as strictly factual historical chronicles, but rather as profound insights into humanity's spiritual aspirations, their significance becomes profoundly illuminating. They unequivocally demonstrate that from the nascent centuries of Christianity, devout believers were persistently preoccupied by the enigma of Jesus' undocumented years. They found it profoundly difficult to reconcile the notion that a man who articulated such profound and universal wisdom could have experienced an entirely unremarkable and obscure youth. Instead, they intuitively perceived that the extensive silence must inevitably conceal something far more momentous, a period characterized by significant travels, intensive studies, and transformative revelations, all of which meticulously prepared him for the exceptional trajectory that lay before him. Visualize a diligent scribe immersed in the ambient, flickering illumination of a monastic scriptorium, his quill diligently inscribing upon parchment. He meticulously records the profound sentiment, not history, but longing. His carefully chosen words represent a deliberate endeavor to capture elusive shadows, to imbue the pervasive silence with discernible form and meaning. While he possesses no verifiable evidence regarding Jesus' specific peregrinations, he is empowered to envision them. And through this very act of imaginative reconstruction, he bequeaths to future generations a valuable testament, not merely of historical occurrences, but of the fundamental human imperative to address and satisfy an inherent informational emptiness. The apocryphal texts persist in our consciousness, much like scattered remnants of a long-forgotten melody. They are, by their very nature, incomplete, frequently discordant, and occasionally out of harmony with established narratives. Nevertheless, they serve as a powerful reminder that an informational void rarely endures as an unpopulated space. Instead, narratives invariably surge forth to occupy it, carrying with them faint echoes of untold journeys and experiences. Regardless of whether these reverberations constitute verifiable historical fact or mere whispered legend, they continue to reach us across the vast expanse of time, as subtle and ephemeral as fading footsteps receding down a long corridor. These disparate apocryphal fragments compellingly underscore the notion that history, in its profound essence, is frequently composed of hushed narratives and subtle insinuations. They demonstrate that information deliberately omitted or excluded can often prove as profoundly revealing as that which is explicitly included. Furthermore, they reveal that within the metaphorical shadows cast by the Gospel's extensive unwritten sections, a chorus of voices continues to softly murmur, persistently inviting us to contemplate the unknown paths Jesus may have traversed during those 18 enigmatic, hidden years of his life. Among the plethora of speculative theories that emerge to address the profound silence surrounding Jesus' undocumented years, few hypotheses maintain such enduring persistence as the proposition that he spent a significant period among the Essenes. This enigmatic Jewish sect maintained a secluded existence within the arid deserts adjacent to the Dead Sea, their ascetic lives etched into the rugged stone cliffs and their sacred texts meticulously preserved within sealed scroll jars. For certain observers, they were perceived as zealous fanatics, consumed by an unwavering fixation on ceremonial purity. Conversely, to others, they represented profound mystics, entrusted with the guardianship of esoteric knowledge deemed too delicate and profound for the comprehension of the mundane world. The Essenes continue to present an enduring enigma even in the contemporary era. Our current understanding of this community is primarily derived from the testimonies of esteemed ancient chroniclers such as Josephus, Philo, and Pliny the Elder, supplemented more recently by the invaluable insights gleaned from the Dead Sea Scrolls, which were unearthed in the caves of Qumran during the mid-20th century. These ancient scrolls vividly delineate a community characterized by its profound separation from mainstream society, actively disavowing the perceived corruption within the Jerusalem temple, and eagerly anticipating the imminent eschatological conclusion of the world. They rigorously adhered to a regimen of stringent discipline, engaged in symbolic ritual ablutions, and partook in sacred communal meals. Their literary output is replete with vivid apocalyptic visions of cosmic light and pervasive darkness, depicting epic conflicts between the sons of righteousness and the sons of evil. Their entire way of life suggested an acute awareness that the world teetered on the precipice of a momentous divine unveiling. Within this environment of stark desert solitude and profound quietude, certain conjectures envision a youthful Jesus moving amongst the Essenes. The discernible parallels between their practices and later Christian traditions are undeniably compelling. The Essenes, for instance, routinely performed ritual baptisms in flowing water, a practice bearing a striking resemblance to John the Baptist's significant purification rite in the Jordan River. Furthermore, they regularly shared communal meals comprising bread and wine, foodstuffs that would subsequently acquire immense cosmic significance within Christian liturgical practice. Moreover, their prophecies spoke of an impending teacher of righteousness, destined to lead the faithful through the tumultuous final days, a figure whose description is hauntingly consonant with the messianic role Jesus would ultimately assume. The expansive desert landscape, characterized by its profound stillness and limitless horizons, inherently constitutes an environment uniquely conducive to deep personal transformation. Such an austere setting systematically divests individuals of conventional comforts and pervasive distractions, leaving them with only their essential spirit and fundamental being. Had Jesus actively sought a period of intense solitude, or had he desired instruction from mentors who exemplified an uncompromising, radical devotion? There were arguably few locales more ideally suited to his quest than the secluded caves and encampments of Qumran. Indeed, some academic researchers even put forth the proposition that John the Baptist himself was profoundly molded by the pervasive influence of Essene doctrines and practices, his impassioned cry from the wilderness resonating with the same urgent apocalyptic fervor characteristic of their teachings. If John's spiritual origins were indeed rooted in this community, it naturally prompts the question of whether Jesus might have traversed a similar formative path. Despite these intriguing conjectures, however, concrete historical evidence supporting such a connection remains conspicuously absent. It is noteworthy that the canonical Gospels, while frequently referencing prominent Jewish sects such as the Pharisees and Sadducees, conspicuously refrain from ever mentioning the Essenes by name. This very silence in itself might be profoundly indicative, potentially concealing a connection that was either too intimate or too inconvenient for the early Christian writers to openly acknowledge. Alternatively, it is entirely plausible that the profound resonance between certain Essene teachings and the subsequent tenets of Jesus' ministry is merely a remarkable yet ultimately coincidental alignment of spiritual thought. The prospect of such an apprenticeship remains profoundly alluring, a compelling counterpoint to what would later manifest so powerfully in Jesus' public ministry. One might envision him, a young acolyte clad in the pristine white garments characteristic of the Essene Brotherhood, undergoing purifying ablutions in their ritual immersion pools carved beneath the stark desert cliffs. Perhaps he would join in the communal recitation of sacred hymns, his voice rising in unison with others beneath the vast, star-dusted expanse of the nocturnal sky. Or listen intently as ancient scrolls were meticulously declaimed by the flickering illumination of torchlight within their secluded communal chambers. Envisioning the rigorous regimen that structured their daily existence reveals a profound commitment, commencing with fervent prayers at the first blush of dawn, followed by shared, simple repasts, then dedicating extended periods to intensive scriptural scholarship, all while maintaining a vigilant readiness for the prophesied culmination of days. It is readily conceivable how such an unwavering, patterned existence could indelibly imprint itself upon the formative spirit of a burgeoning spiritual aspirant. Should Jesus indeed have sojourned within the Essene community, the enduring legacy he derived from their way of life might have been less an adoption of specific theological tenets and more a profound internalization of their unwavering self-control. This would encompass their profound quietude, their concentrated attention, and their unblemished singleness of intention. These particular attributes resonate powerfully throughout his subsequent public ministry, manifesting not as rigid, prescriptive ordinances, but rather as an intrinsic fortitude and an unparalleled perspicuity. This profound inner clarity empowered him to transcend conventional customs and articulate his message with an undeniable inherent authority. In stark contrast to those who rigidly adhered to established ceremonial practices, he ingeniously reconfigured their very essence. While many passively anticipated a distant eschatological climax, he boldly declared the imminent arrival of a divine reign, a spiritual dominion already actively permeating the contemporary world. The Essenes brotherhood regarded themselves as consecrated custodians of an esoteric covenant, a select and hallowed remnant meticulously preserved for the climactic final epoch. Within the personage of Jesus, certain interpreters discern the actualization of this very vision, not through an exclusive withdrawal from society, but through an inclusive embrace of humanity. He emerged from the austere solitude of the desert wilderness and ventured forth into the bustling human settlements, carrying with him, perhaps, the intense fervor of Essenes spiritual dedication, yet profoundly remolding it into boundless compassion, miraculous restorative power, and an unreserved, universal summons. The contemplation that he might have indeed walked among these reclusive ascetics transcends mere academic or historical inquiry. It serves as a potent elucidation that profound wisdom frequently germinates and flourishes in secluded, often overlooked locales, and that the profound stillness of the desert, much like the unspoken depths within sacred texts, can safeguard invaluable insights and spiritual riches, imperceptible to those who traverse their paths with undue haste or superficiality. Allow one's imagination to vividly conjure the ancient caverns of Qumran. The sun-baked cliffs ascend majestically, their pallid surfaces starkly delineated against a fiercely blazing firmament. In the far-off panorama, the Dead Sea stretches, its surface placid and reflective as polished glass, its waters dense with an extraordinary saline concentration. A youthful silhouette traverses the constricted pathways, ancient scrolls secured beneath his arm, his simple sandals caked with the fine dust of the arid terrain. He momentarily halts at the tranquil margin of the water, descends deliberately into the refreshing current, and emerges, droplets shimmering upon his form, his eyelids gently closed, his countenance uplifted towards the resplendent sun. No extant chronicle definitively records this precise instant, nor does any canonical gospel account meticulously preserve such a scene, and yet, across the expanse of countless generations, within the collective human imagination, this evocative image persists, a faint yet insistent intimation of the Essenes, resonating softly through the profound lacuna of Jesus' unrecorded early adulthood. As the vast, undocumented expanse of Jesus' formative years unfolds before the contemplative mind, a venerable and enduring tradition posits his early journey not amidst the familiar, verdant hills of Galilee, but rather along the storied, life-giving banks of the River Nile. Egypt, an ancient realm synonymous with its majestic pharaohs and monumental pyramids, had historically served as a sanctuary for the descendants of Israel. The venerable patriarch Abraham had traversed its expansive deserts. Joseph, a figure of profound biblical significance, had ascended to a position of immense authority within its royal courts. Moses, the revered prophet, had guided his people out from its oppressive servitude. Furthermore, in accordance with the narrative presented in the Gospel of Matthew, Joseph and Mary once sought asylum within its borders with the infant Jesus, fleeing the malevolent fury of Herod's decree. If his nascent infancy was indeed touched by the looming presence of the Nile, it prompts a compelling inquiry. Might not his subsequent, undocumented years have drawn him back to that very same land of ancient mysteries? First-century Egypt represented far more than merely a vestige of its pharaonic past. It stood as a pivotal nexus where diverse intellectual currents intersected. Alexandria, the magnificent metropolis strategically situated at the mouth of the Nile, radiated brilliantly as an unparalleled center of erudition. Its legendary libraries, though perhaps no longer at their absolute zenith of fame, nonetheless continued to safeguard an immense collection of ancient manuscripts originating from Greece, the Mesopotamian realm of Babylon, distant India, and myriad other civilizations. Jewish savants also congregated there, undertaking the monumental task of rendering the sacred Hebrew scriptures into Greek, a seminal translation famously known as the Septuagint. Within this vibrant, cosmopolitan urban hub, the profound disciplines of philosophy, esoteric mysticism, practical medicine, and celestial astronomy all converged and intermingled. For any ardent young individual thirsting for enlightenment and knowledge, Alexandria unequivocally presented itself as an unparalleled locale where the collective sagacity of the entire known world found its dynamic confluence. Oral tradition subtly intimates the possibility that Jesus might have traversed those grand, polished marble colonnades, attentively absorbing the eloquent discourse of renowned philosophers, listening to spirited intellectual debates reverberating through acoustically vibrant courtyards, and observing the solemn ministrations of priests dedicated to Isis and Osiris as they enacted sacred rites imbued with millennia of arcane significance. The striking similarities between ancient Egyptian theological concepts and later Christian iconography are indeed arresting. Themes such as demise and subsequent reanimation, divine adjudication and everlasting existence, and the ultimate vanquishing of gloom by effulgence. These profound motifs were intricately embedded within the fabric of Egyptian religious thought for centuries prior to their manifestation in Christian homilies. To assert direct influence might be considered an audacious proposition, yet to dismiss the undeniable thematic resonance between them proves an untenable stance. Furthermore, there exist more subdued narratives, diligently preserved by the indigenous Coptic Christian communities within Egypt, which contend that Jesus indeed sojourned among their ancestors. Certain adherents underscore the enduring wisdom encapsulated in monastic aphorisms and the profound ascetical practices cultivated in the desert, as faint yet discernible reverberations of his undisclosed period spent along the Nile. Other accounts describe clandestine healing academies, where botanical remedies, incantatory verses, and sanctified unguents were expertly employed. Practices that perhaps foreshadowed the miraculous therapeutic abilities Jesus later demonstrated with such profound efficacy. Visualize the youthful artisan, perhaps a carpenter by trade, strolling contemplatively through the majestic thoroughfares of Alexandria, the invigorating Mediterranean breeze gently billowing his cloak. In the bustling harbor, vessels arriving from distant India and imperial Rome jostle for position, their sails taut and luminous, silhouetted against the expansive horizon. Within the hallowed precincts of the city's numerous temples, fragrant incense ascends in elegant spirals towards deities meticulously sculpted from enduring stone. Concurrently, in its esteemed lecture halls, erudite scholars meticulously delineate intricate astronomical charts and engage in profound discourse concerning the concealed, harmonious order of the universe. In the local synagogue, sacred Torah scrolls are sonorously recited aloud in both the venerable Hebrew and the lingua franca of Greek, allowing the distinct voices of two ancient traditions to harmoniously converge. It is within this crucible of diverse knowledge, some theorists propose, that Jesus might have assimilated the expansive intellectual breadth that subsequently enabled him to articulate his message across disparate cultures, thereby forging a profound connection between Jew and Gentile without distinction. Nevertheless, should such extensive travels indeed have transpired, they have conspicuously failed to leave any discernible imprint within the established canonical scriptures. This omission, it is speculated, might have been entirely intentional. The nascent Christian community, in its foundational stages, could have harbored considerable apprehension regarding any associations implying that its divine deliverer derived profound insights from sources external to the sacred covenant of Israel. To forge a direct link between him and Egypt, a territory frequently depicted in scriptural narratives as a site of arduous exile and tyrannical subjugation, would undoubtedly have proven profoundly disquieting. Consequently, it may have been deemed more prudent to allow these years to remain unmentioned than to intimate that the illuminating radiance of the Messiah was in some measure ignited by extraneous, non-Israelite intellectual or spiritual sources. Despite the canonical silence, the spectral presence of Egypt continues to captivate the human imagination. The colossal pyramids, already venerable monuments when Jesus might have walked its lands, stood as immutable, silent testaments to civilizations that had long since receded into antiquity, their massive stones imbued with the weight of ages. The majestic Nile persisted in its timeless cycle, its waters swelling and receding in accordance with the primordial rhythms of the celestial sphere. And within that land of profound historical shadows, profound sagacity was meticulously safeguarded, much like precious grain hermetically sealed within a granary, patiently awaiting discovery by those discerning individuals who earnestly sought its illumination. One might, with closed eyes, vividly envision Jesus standing poised at the ethereal hour of twilight upon the verdant banks of the river. The expansive sheet of water shimmers with the residual glow of the departing sun. Slender papyrus reeds undulate gently in the soft breeze, and the plaintive cries of unseen, distant avian creatures waft serenely across the ambient air. On the far horizon, ancient temples ascend majestically, their colossal forms silhouetted against the fading light. Their intricate hieroglyphs meticulously incised with narratives predating recorded recollection. A young man, his features contemplative, surveys this profound landscape, inwardly assimilating arcane mysteries, discerning profound verities that defy textual articulation, and meticulously preparing for a momentous spiritual undertaking destined, one day, to transcend the geographical confines of Galilee. Irrespective of whether historical scholarship ultimately validates such conjectures, the notion retains an enduring, radiant quality that the enigmatic, unchronicled years of Jesus' early life might indeed have been dedicated to traversing the ancient, shadow-laden pathways of Egypt. a realm where the cumulative sagacity of countless epochs lay dormant, akin to a concealed seed, poised to unfurl its latent potential when the opportune moment arrived. Should the imaginative faculty extend its contemplation of Jesus' travels beyond the borders of Egypt, it swiftly conceives of him traversing the monumental arteries of commerce that intricately interconnected the diverse civilizations of the ancient world. These were the legendary thoroughfares collectively designated as the Silk Road, an expansive and intricate labyrinth of routes extending from the sun-drenched littoral of the Mediterranean Sea, through the vast Persian Empire, across the formidable mountainous terrains of Central Asia, and deep into the cultural heartlands of India and China. Along these enduring pathways, caravans progressed with deliberate yet unceasing momentum, laden not only with luxurious silks, exotic spices, and precious jewels. Crucially, they transported far more than mere material commodities. They conveyed profound philosophical concepts, compelling oral narratives, and diverse spiritual doctrines, which were exchanged as hushed intimations from one flickering campfire to the next, much like incandescent sparks leaping dynamically into the enveloping darkness of the night. Certain esoteric traditions propose that during his undisclosed years, Jesus might have journeyed along these very thoroughfares, presenting himself as an earnest spiritual inquirer amidst the throngs of bustling merchants and reclusive mystics. The captivating appeal of this hypothesis is irrefutable. The Silk Road functioned less as a solitary, delineated highway and more as an intricate tapestry woven from countless cultural junctures and intellectual convergences. Along these ancient caravan trails, the profound tenets of Greek philosophy could encounter and engage with the spiritual wisdom of Hindu teachings. Similarly, the dualistic cosmology of Persian thought might intermingle harmoniously with the meditative practices of Buddhism. It served as an invaluable conduit for the interchange not merely of the palpable economic resources of various nations, but also, and perhaps more significantly, for the inestimable intangible riches of human intellect and spiritual reflection. Indigenous legends originating from India offer faint allusions to a revered, saintly personage identified as Isa, who is reputed to have journeyed from the Western lands to pursue profound studies within their spiritual traditions. In the latter half of the 19th century, a Russian explorer named Nicholas Notovich asserted that he had unearthed an ancient manuscript within a secluded Himalayan monastery. This document purportedly detailed the life narrative of Saint Isa, depicting a young man who embarked from his homeland in Israel and embarked on an extensive peregrination into India, where he purportedly received instruction from both Brahmin priests and Buddhist monks before eventually returning to his native region. While academic researchers vigorously dispute the veracity of Notovich's account, with the majority largely dismissing it as a fabrication, the compelling narrative nevertheless continues to reverberate. This persistent resonance stems from its appeal to a profound human aspiration to account for the intrinsically universal nature of Jesus' profound sagacity. The discernible parallels are indeed highly suggestive and thought-provoking. Buddhist scriptures eloquently articulated principles of profound compassion, advocating for a cultivated detachment from ephemeral worldly desires, and emphasizing the imperative to extend benevolent care to all sentient beings. Concurrently, Hindu philosophical inquiry profoundly explored concepts of ultimate cosmic unity, the immanence of a divine spark within every individual soul, and the cyclical procession of birth, demise, and subsequent reincarnation. When one encounters Jesus' discourse regarding the ephemeral beauty of the lilies of the field, or his proclamation concerning the immanent kingdom of God residing within each person, or his assertion that the humble shall inherit the earth, the thematic consonance with ancient Eastern spiritual traditions appears to palpably stir just beneath the surface of the narrative. Could these striking reverberations be mere happenstance? Or might they, conversely, represent profound intellectual and spiritual seeds sown and nurtured during extensive journeys along the ancient Silk Road? Envision the youthful Jesus, a solitary figure moving amidst a vibrant tapestry of itinerant merchants and devout pilgrims, his simple sandals thoroughly coated with the accumulated dust of countless miles of arduous travel. He traverses the ancient city of Damascus, with its bustling, aromatic marketplaces redolent with the exotic fragrances of saffron and frankincense. He journeys onward through the vast reaches of Persia, a land where Zoroastrian fire temples radiate an ethereal glow against the encroaching twilight sky, their sacred flames assiduously maintained by robed priests who articulate profound doctrines concerning the perpetual cosmic struggle between luminous light and encroaching darkness. He ascends formidable mountain passes where the atmospheric air becomes noticeably rarefied, only to subsequently descend into lush, fertile valleys teeming with an exuberant spectrum of colors and a symphony of natural sounds. Each deliberate step propels him further into diverse lands where the pantheon of deities is extensive, yet where an overarching wisdom frequently converges upon a singular, foundational verity: that the divine essence is neither remote nor inaccessible, but rather intimately proximate, intricately interwoven into the very warp and woof of all manifest existence. The expansive world, in truth, lies not in distant, inaccessible realms, but rather intimately intertwined within the very fabric of human existence. Within the bustling confines of roadside taverns and wayfaring hostels, merchant processions pause for respite, and myriad tongues converge. The sonorous tones of Greek, the resonant cadences of Aramaic, the ancient lilt of Sanskrit, and the distinct inflections of Chinese. Voices undulate, ascending and descending with the rhythmic ebb and flow akin to the symphony of far-off oceans. An adolescent from Galilee would undoubtedly have been an outsider in such a cosmopolitan milieu, yet perhaps not entirely unregarded, for astute traders frequently cherished narratives as profoundly as they valued precious silver, and venerable sages were universally honored wherever their travels might lead them. In these vibrant convergences of culture, it requires little imaginative effort to envision a young man attending intently, assimilating diverse perspectives, and subtly molding the profound understanding that would, in due course, astound his own compatriots. The venerable Silk Road, moreover, represents a deeper significance than mere transit. It stands as an enduring emblem of global fraternity and mutual reliance. No land was ever utterly sequestered, no spiritual conviction ever entirely uninfluenced by adjacent cultures. The intriguing notion that Jesus might have traversed these ancient routes serves, in part, as a recognition that his profound doctrines transcend the confines of Palestine's soil, that they resonate with the spirit and ethos of diverse territories. Naturally, professional chroniclers consistently remind us of the absence of substantiating proof. The canonical texts offer no testimony regarding such journeys. Furthermore, the purported scrolls that speak of an enigmatic figure named Isa remain widely disputed. And yet, this very absence of records permits the human fancy to wander freely. For in the quietude of that undocumented period, the prospect of the Silk Road entices, much like a dimly recalled tune, remote, subtle, yet uncannily recognizable. One might close their eyes and listen intently. One might discern the groan of mercantile carts, the muffled tread of dromedaries across shifting sands, the hushed murmur of diverse dialects converging into a singular, overarching soundscape. Somewhere amidst this vibrant tapestry, perhaps, a youthful inquirer proceeds discreetly, his visage turned toward vistas never chronicled by sacred texts. His trail might be obscured by time, yet the compelling thought persists that the sagacity of Galilee could indeed have been tempered along the serpentine routes of the Silk Road, where East and West have historically converged in unspoken understanding and shared narrative. Far beyond the arid expanses of Judea and the established caravan routes of Persia lies a tranquil domain enveloped in an ethereal shroud of vapor and alpine stillness, the verdant valleys of Kashmir. Situated aloft within the formidable Himalayan range, where glacial streams incise verdant glens and majestic conifers ascend toward the heavens. Mythic narratives persist regarding a sacred figure who once walked there. Some indigenous inhabitants refer to him as Isa, a name that echoes remarkably with the Western appellation of Jesus. Others speak of a revered seer from Occidental lands who imparted empathy, restored the ailing, and then departed with the same enigmatic swiftness as his arrival. The precise origins of this particular tradition are challenging to ascertain. Some of the initial murmurings manifest in oral accounts transmitted by Kashmir villagers, tales describing a sagacious instructor whose doctrines mirrored those of the Christ known to the West. During the 19th century, intrepid explorers and diligent missionaries operating in the region documented encountering these narratives directly. Nicholas Notovich, the same traveler who purported to unearth the life of Isa manuscript in a Ladakh monastery, also indicated Kashmir as a locale where Jesus might once have walked. Subsequent writers, encompassing both scholarly researchers and speculative theorists, elaborated upon these assertions, interlacing them within the persistent hypothesis of Jesus in India. The valley itself appears to harmonize with the mythos. In the venerable old city of Srinagar, there stands a shrine known as Rosabal. It is venerated by certain indigenous inhabitants as the sepulchre of a holy personage called Uz Asaf, an instructor purportedly hailing from distant lands, whose story intriguingly corresponds to that of Jesus. Inside, a stone coffin reposes veiled in fabric, enveloped in a profound quietude. To some, it is merely the sepulchre of an unidentified spiritual recluse. To others, however, it stands as testimony suggesting Jesus did not succumb to crucifixion, but rather journeyed Orientward, spending his concluding years in Kashmir's verdant glens. This hypothesis remains undeniably contentious, rejected by the majority of chroniclers and intensely discussed by religious scholars. For adherents of Christianity, it contests the foundational assertion of resurrection. For followers of Islam, it concurs with narratives depicting Jesus as a prophet who did not physically perish, but was divinely ascended. For skeptics, it is simply another myth emerging from quietude and yearning. Yet, the sheer endurance of the narrative murmured for centuries within these mountain valleys renders it challenging to wholly disregard. If one disregards the matter of sepulchres and sacred artifacts, the notion of Jesus traveling to Kashmir during his undocumented years possesses considerable metaphorical significance. The region has long served as a vibrant confluence of civilizations, where Hindu, Buddhist, and subsequently Islamic traditions intermingled. To traverse this land was to stand at the nexus of venerable philosophies. The tranquil vistas, with their glacier-crowned summits mirrored in placid tarns, would have offered the seclusion conducive to meditation, and the cloisters ensconced in secluded mountain defiles would undoubtedly have extended hospitality to those who yearned for enlightenment. One might imagine Jesus strolling amidst the towering sentinels of the Himalayas, the atmosphere rarefied and bracing, sacred banners fluttering vigorously in the breeze. One might picture him engaging with ascetics within luminescent monastic chambers, attending to intonations that undulate akin to ocean swells. One might envision him assimilating knowledge from wise masters who expounded upon non-attachment, empathy, and the perpetual interconnectedness of existence. The cadence of daily existence in this locale would have been distinct from the viticultural landscapes and agricultural expanses of Galilee. Yet the principles he would later teach, mildness, straightforwardness, spiritual tranquility, would not have been alien to such an environment. Even if the story of Kashmir proves to be more mythical narrative than factual chronicle, it undeniably reveals a deep insight, an acknowledgement that the sagacity of Jesus appears to surmount geographical boundaries. His utterances reverberate through diverse civilizations, harmonizing with verities imparted in remote glens, as much as in Judean houses of worship. The people of Kashmir, perceiving parallels with their ancestral customs within the Gospels, deemed it logical to conceive that he had once traversed their majestic mountains. In the tranquil moments of nocturnal contemplation, Kashmir itself integrates into the enigma. Its valleys, nestled amidst colossal summits, seem like an apt backdrop for undocumented epochs. It is a land where quietude predominates, where the sacred presence seems intimately accessible, where an itinerant instructor might go unobserved and yet bequeath a legacy that endures for millennia. One might close their eyes and envision the glen as twilight descends. Frost glistens subtly on the remote crests. A stream flows pellucidly, mirroring the dying embers of the solar orb. In a small village, a wayfarer reposes, his utterances gentle yet incisive, his aura imparting a recollection too persistent to diminish. Whether factual chronicle or enduring myth, the valleys of Kashmir guard their enigma assiduously, preserving within their silence the prospect that Jesus once walked there, his lost years sheltered in the colossal presence of the Himalayas. Among the more unusual narratives that traverse epochs is the tale positing that Jesus, well in advance of his public service, journeyed not towards the Orient, but to the Occident, across tempestuous waters and turbulent weather, to the fog-enveloped insular domain of Britannia. This myth posits his presence in the company of Joseph of Arimathea, his affluent kinsman, and later his discreet patron. Joseph, it is recounted, was a personage of considerable standing, a merchant dealing in stannum and various ores greatly esteemed in antiquity. His itineraries guided him to the remote periphery of the Roman Imperium, specifically to Cornwall, where deep excavations penetrated the ground and sturdy vessels transported their merchandise into the anticipating ports of Gallia and further afield. It is within these narratives that a young Jesus is purportedly to have traveled with Joseph. Together, They navigated the craggy littoral zones where escarpments ascend precipitously from the ocean and expansive heathlands extended bleakly under wide heavens. The legends affirm that he traversed the verdant undulations, that he gazed in wonder at megalithic formations predating recollection, and that he heeded the pronouncements of Celtic priests whose sagacity was intrinsically linked to terrestrial elements, celestial bodies, and temporal cycles. Medieval poets diligently sustained the narrative. William Blake, many centuries later, would render the concept imperishable in poetry, posing the profound question of whether those feet in ancient time once walked upon England's mountains green. The query itself transformed into a form of supplication, intertwined with an ardent desire for hallowed manifestation within the homeland soil. To entertain the thought that the Christ had once stood upon Britain's shores was to consecrate the very territory, to incorporate it into the hallowed unfolding of chronology. What potential benefits could such an expedition have yielded? The archipelago, though distant, was not entirely cut off from the broader world. Stannum from Cornwall constituted merchandise desired throughout the Mediterranean basin, and commerce connected even these far-flung territories to the epicenter of imperial power. In coastal villages, Jesus might have observed the amalgamation of civilizations, Romans, Celts, Phoenicians, all intersecting in the commercial forum. He may have listened to narratives of deities, both formidable and benevolent, divinities presiding over waterways and woodlands, deities requiring propitiation, and gods who brought restoration. He may have strolled amidst megalithic structures oriented towards celestial bodies, discovering how ancestral societies interpreted the firmament not through written scrolls, but via petroglyphic formations. Naturally, to professional chroniclers, the tale is more mythical narrative than probable occurrence. There is no documentation within Roman annals, no material evidence uncovered through excavation, suggesting that the boy from Nazareth crossed the sea. But the persistence of the narrative communicates a different truth, that people across Europe yearned to envision their integration into the enigma of Christ's life. Given the undocumented 18-year period, they questioned, why not within their native territory, under their familiar firmament? The legend bestowed upon them a feeling of affiliation, a participation in the revelation of the divine. One might close their eyes and envision the scene, the tempestuous Atlantic heaving against somber precipices, seabirds circling in the briny atmosphere, the resounding impact of breakers reverberating within secluded inlets. A modest vessel glides into the port, its canvas mended, its framework groaning. Among the crew is a youthful lad, raven-haired, pensive, his eyes fastened upon the distant skyline. He disembarks, his footwear grating upon shingle shores, and for a fleeting moment, the island transforms into consecrated earth. The island transforms into a revered sanctuary, a sacred domain. Whether or not it truly happened, the narrative concerning Britain's forgotten shore resonates deeply with humanity's intrinsic yearning to bridge the chasm between the temporal and the eternal, to bring the boundless within reach. The mere contemplation that Jesus might have traversed those lands, amidst ancient mines and expansive moors, imbues not merely the physical landscape with spiritual significance, but also consecrates the very faculty of human creativity and conceptualization. And in that fertile imagination, the profound quietude surrounding his undocumented early adulthood is no longer perceived as an evidentiary void, but rather as a boundless canvas for awe and profound curiosity. For the lacuna within the sacred texts does not diminish or contract. Instead, it proliferates, growing ever wider. Into this expanding void surge narratives and mythical accounts, akin to a torrent, transmuting the wordless chasm into a harmonious melody, a vibrant epic. And so, the ceaseless gales sweeping across the craggy precipices and verdant expanses of Britain appear, even in the contemporary era, to bear a subtle, lingering resonance of long-vanished perambulations, belonging to one who may or may not have once walked their ancient shore. If the undocumented years of Jesus remain enveloped in an impenetrable cloak of taciturnity, one of the most straightforward yet profoundly captivating hypotheses is that he acquired his profound insights and understanding not within the hallowed confines of ecclesiastical edifices or the secluded cloisters of remote monastic orders, but rather in the vibrant, pulsating nucleus of the antique commercial square. For in the first century, commerce constituted the very vital essence, the indispensable circulatory system of global interaction, transporting not merely tangible commodities, but also the resonant cadences of human speech, melodious compositions, and intricate narratives across expansive geographical boundaries. In locales where traders congregated, intellectual currents and information disseminated freely and abundantly, and perhaps more than anywhere else. It was in such dynamic spaces that a young man could immerse himself in the boundless panorama of human intellectual endeavor and philosophical contemplation. Nazareth itself was not far from Sepphoris, a burgeoning metropolis undergoing an ambitious reconstruction project throughout the formative years of Jesus' early life. Merely a day's journey on foot, it teemed with the energetic presence of Roman administrative personnel, skilled Hellenic craftsmen, erudite Jewish academics, and wayfarers originating from every conceivable cardinal point. Some chroniclers have suggested that Joseph, accompanied by his progeny, may have engaged in their trade as skilled woodworkers within its precincts, meticulously fashioning timber for domestic dwellings, artisanal ateliers, structural spans, and foundational supports. If this proposition holds true, Jesus would have found himself positioned on a daily basis at the dynamic convergence point of disparate civilizations, perceiving the resonant cadences of Latin in one auditory canal, the melodic inflections of Greek in the other, and the familiar sounds of Aramaic, his native idiom, emanating from his own vocalizations. Envision him now in the market square, encompassed by booths laden to overflowing with succulent figs and plump olives, vibrant textiles imbued with rich dyes and meticulously crafted articles of hammered bronze. An oriental purveyor unfurls lengths of gossamer silk, its surface undulating with a lustrous sheen reminiscent of liquid light. A vendor hailing from the African continent presents intricate carvings fashioned from precious ivory, demonstrating unparalleled artistry. The metallic chime of coinage, the raucous vocalizations of pack animals, and the contentious vocal exchanges concerning pecuniary valuations permeate the atmosphere. And in the midst of this vibrant chaos, narratives and accounts are exchanged with the same uninhibited facility as aromatic condiments. Epics recounting far-flung military conflicts, profound philosophical tenets originating in the intellectual hub of Athens, and arcane ceremonial practices witnessed within the sacred precincts of Indian sanctuaries. A perceptive youth, attentive to the subtleties of his surroundings, could glean a greater breadth of understanding and wisdom from this dynamic environment than from the most extensive collection of written parchments. Indeed, These itinerant merchants functioned as informal pedagogues in their own right, disseminating knowledge and insights. They bore sagacity and erudition with the same unburdened ease as their commercial commodities, imparting aphorisms, maxims, and fragmented tenets of faith accumulated throughout their extensive peregrinations. From these seasoned travelers, Jesus might have heard tales of the hallowed Zoroastrian pyres in ancient Persia, of the serene Buddhist monastic enclaves of Bactria, or of the skilled Egyptian practitioners of healing arts, who employed botanical remedies and mystic invocations. He might have received dispatches detailing the ceaseless territorial expansions of the Roman Empire, accounts of emperors ascended to power and subsequently assassinated, and vivid descriptions of gladiatorial contests unfolding in remote amphitheaters. For an individual possessing an acute receptiveness to ambient information, the entire global expanse transmuted into an expansive sacred text, devoid of any material scroll or written medium. This compelling possibility situates the undocumented period of Jesus' early life not within the context of arduous, distant spiritual journeys, but rather amidst the fabric of everyday engagement and profound absorption. Through diligent labor, through assiduous auditory perception, and through the gradual assimilation of the myriad vocalizations that enveloped his existence. The bustling marketplace served as a crucible of inherent paradoxes, where avarice coexisted alongside magnanimity, where brutality stood in stark contrast to benevolence, and where systemic exploitation was juxtaposed against authentic camaraderie. To bear witness to such variegated human expressions was to acquire profound insights into the intricate workings of the human spirit, comprehending both its inherent vulnerabilities and its elevated capacities for virtue. Later, when Jesus articulated narratives concerning affluent individuals and indigent, bereaved women, of misplaced currency and concealed riches, his didactic allegories may have subtly reverberated with the precise vignettes and interactions he had previously witnessed amidst the commercial practitioners. There is something quietly beautiful in this conceptualization, that the Son of Man assimilated sagacity not exclusively from revered spiritual instructors, but also from the lives and interactions of common individuals, from the contentious negotiations of traders, from the self-aggrandizing declarations of itinerants, from the earnest entreaties of the destitute, and from agriculturalists vending their produce at the nascent hours of daylight. Amidst the tumultuous din and vibrant activity of commerce, he may have perceived the expansive, intricate tableau representing the entirety of human exigencies and aspirations. And in that rich tapestry, he may have discerned the veiled underlying structures and designs indicative of the divine realm. Picture him again, not as an isolated sojourner traversing arid wastes or towering peaks, but rather as an adolescent figure immersed within the bustling marketplace, keenly observing, attentively listening, and profoundly assimilating all stimuli. An aromatic vendor delicately pulverizes cinnamon bark between his digits, thereby liberating its fragrant essence into the ambient atmosphere. A skilled raconteur enthralls young audiences with enthralling narratives originating from far-off territories. A fatigued mercantile convoy traverses the thoroughfare, its dromedaries burdened with voluminous rolls of fabric, its accompanying drovers vocalizing in unfamiliar idioms. The adolescent figure remains on the periphery, his gaze luminous with curiosity, his intellect actively engaged in contemplation. His presence eludes general perception, He is merely an anonymous countenance amidst the thronging multitude. Nevertheless, within his nascent being, the scriptural lacuna of the Gospels pulsates with vibrant observation, with an immeasurable accretion of knowledge, and with the nascent kernels of sagacity destined one day to erupt into profound didactic allegories. The theory of Jesus among traders might indeed be perceived as wanting in the majestic sweep and exotic allure associated with expeditions to the ancient lands of Egypt or the distant subcontinent of India. Nonetheless, it encapsulates a deeply resonant verity. That profound understanding frequently originates not from exceptional or sensational experiences, but rather from a meticulous and contemplative engagement with the commonplace. The scriptural reticence within the Gospels may thus obscure not a series of adventurous foreign sojourns, but rather the serene, consistent maturation of a spirit uniquely attuned to profound auditory perception. Consequently, the ephemeral structures of the marketplace recede into the annals of recollection, their multifarious vocalizations dispersed and borne away, akin to motes of dust upon the prevailing breeze. Yet, conceivably, secreted amidst their quotidian disarray, resided the primordial reverberations of doctrines destined to revolutionize global consciousness. Precepts originating not solely from the pronouncements of seers and sacerdotal figures, but equally from the insights of merchants and wayfarers, from the interwoven existences forged within the unadorned mercantile exchanges of a dynamic, globally interdependent epoch. When the Gospels avert their narrative gaze from a span encompassing almost 2 full decades of Jesus' earthly existence, the ensuing lacuna of information resonates with an almost palpable intentionality, suggesting its placement was not a fortuitous oversight, but rather a meticulously conceived narrative strategy. This is a profound quietude, laden with significant implication, akin to a reverent caesura within a hallowed composition, or an interstice between respiratory cycles, where the very absence of sound integrates seamlessly into the overarching harmony. A meticulous engagement with the sacred texts reveals the discernible deliberateness of this quietude, as if it were acting as a vigilant custodian of something either excessively valuable or inherently perilous to articulate explicitly. In ancient writing, taciturnity did not invariably denote a void or a lack of content. On occasion, it functioned as an expression of profound veneration, a deliberate mechanism for safeguarding that which is utterly inexpressible or too sacred for the uninitiated gaze. The sacred Hebrew writings themselves frequently envelop profound enigmas within a shroud of quietude. The unpronounced appellation of the divine, the undocumented interlude of Moses' life spent in the land of Midian, and the protracted period of quiet anticipation separating prophetic utterance from its ultimate realization. To refrain from articulation was, at certain junctures, to convey the entirety of meaning. Such omissions served to safeguard profundities that mere verbalization might inevitably corrupt or misrepresent. The inspired authors of the Gospels, the evangelists, may have possessed an intuitive comprehension of this nuanced principle. Their primary commission was not to furnish a comprehensive biographical account, but rather to proclaim a message of profound beatitude, to unveil those truths of paramount importance for the cultivation of spiritual conviction. Of what consequence was it, indeed, if the artisan from Nazareth matured into adulthood without public fanfare, sequestered from the scrutiny of the populace? Conceivably, this narrative hiatus functioned as a form of esoteric curtain, serving to impress upon us the immutable reality that the divine dominion cannot be entirely circumscribed or exhaustively delineated within the confines of written script. Nevertheless, this pervasive quietude simultaneously engenders a persistent stream of inquiries that resist resolution. If, indeed, that protracted period of his life was devoid of any substantive import, why then perpetuate even the recollection of its omission from the narrative? Why not merely commence the scriptural account directly with the inception of his public service? Instead, the canonical Gospels render this informational lacuna conspicuously apparent, presenting it as an entryway revealed yet perpetually sealed. That enigmatic portal simultaneously stimulates fervent conjecture while resolutely denying ingress. It appears as if the evangelists intended for us to apprehend. Behold, within this narrative structure reposes a concealed antechamber, yet its constituent elements are not intended for our direct perusal. Certain theological scholars posit that this narrative reticence was designed to inculcate a profound sense of implicit faith and reliance. Through the calculated exclusion of that specific chronological segment, the Gospels compel the readership to concentrate not upon the incremental maturation of an existence, but rather upon the divine mandate that erupts with startling abruptness, as if materializing ex nihilo. Jesus manifests as a complete entity, resplendent in his spiritual luminescence, and thoroughly equipped for his sacred undertaking. His inherent spiritual prerogative derives not from a meticulously chronicled formative period, but rather from the profound enigma of his very being and manifestation. The undocumented interlude serves to accentuate the perception that his advent is not a product of human cultivation or tutelage, but rather an emanation of an unequivocal celestial summons. Nevertheless, it is a fundamental truth that quietude is never entirely devoid of content or latent potential. The unrecorded period of Jesus' life beckons forth human projection, imaginative conceptualization, and profound yearning. This temporal void transforms into an expansive artistic medium upon which successive generations have rendered their idiosyncratic interpretations of the Messiah. Esoteric practitioners imbued them with clandestine rites of passage. Academic researchers posited periods of intensive scholarly pursuit, and critical rationalists attributed them to mundane anonymity. Thus conceived, the absence of verbalization proves to be more fecund and productive than explicit discourse. It functions as the unique existential arena where every individual spiritual inquirer encounters the profound enigma according to their personal paradigm. Envision for a moment the concept of quietude personified as an instructor. Within the profound tranquility of those undocumented chronological segments, Jesus may have assimilated insights of a profundity surpassing anything that could be imparted by any written parchment. The profound instruction inherent in endurance, in diligent toil, and in contemplative isolation. These lessons extended to the wisdom gleaned from observing the cyclical transformations of the natural world, from heeding the anguished laments of the impoverished, and from witnessing the systematic perpetration of inequity within the commercial arena. Occasionally, taciturnity imparts a greater depth of understanding than verbal communication. It divests the mind of extraneous diversions, thereby revealing only the fundamental core of significance. The enigmatic quietude pervading the sacred texts, therefore, constitutes not simply an unfortunate lacuna deserving of lamentation, but rather a profound spiritual curtain inviting contemplative reflection. Analogous to the innermost sanctum of an ancient temple, deliberately secluded and imperceptible to the common gaze. It intimates that genuine sanctity often necessitates a degree of concealment or unobtrusive existence. Certain verities are destined to persist in an unarticulated state, not due to any inherent vacuity, but precisely because they possess an overwhelming plenitude, an excessive luminosity that defies linguistic encapsulation. As one seeks repose this evening, permit that pervasive quietude to envelop and permeate one's consciousness. Contemplate that undocumented chronological span, not as a void or an omission, but rather as an inherent presence, concealed, expectant, and in a state of profound germination. It represents the profound calm preceding a momentous upheaval, the profound immobility preceding an epical unveiling. In a manner analogous to how the nocturnal hours precede and ready the advent of daybreak, so too does the scriptural quietude condition and prepare humanity for the resonant utterance that shall one day reverberate with thunderous authority from the summit of the sacred mountain. The prophetic timbre that will articulate profound allegories and fervent supplications. The indelible voice destined to be etched eternally into human memory. The resonant voice that will forever echo through time. The profound stillness, therefore, constitutes an intrinsic element of the historical account, a deliberate interlude meticulously carved into the narrative's fabric. This serves as a poignant reminder that not every truth can or should be articulated. Indeed, some enigmas persist not to be unraveled, but rather to be held in profound veneration. Consequently, the lacuna of Jesus' formative years within the Gospels emerges not as a deficiency, but as a distinguishing characteristic, a mystical hush that reverberates across millennia, subtly conveying that even in perceived absence, the divine essence remains undeniably present. As the nascent Christian communities embarked upon the monumental task of compiling their sacred scriptures, the quietude enveloping Jesus' unrecorded years might not have represented the sole instance of unspoken history. Alongside the canonical Gospels that ultimately secured their place in the authoritative collection, a plethora of other narratives circulated. Ancient manuscripts now categorized as apocryphal, Gospels controversially labeled as heretical, and venerable traditions meticulously preserved through hushed oral transmission rather than formal parchment. Some of these audacious accounts boldly recounted Jesus' early life, his extensive travels, and even his profound teachings disseminated beyond the confines of Judea. Nevertheless, the vigilant custodians of orthodox doctrine exercised meticulous discernment, and a substantial body of these narratives remained excluded from the accepted corpus. The intricate process of canon formation was neither swift nor uncomplicated. Over successive centuries, esteemed bishops and ecclesiastical councils engaged in rigorous deliberations, meticulously scrutinizing which writings genuinely embodied the authentic voice of Christ and which were destined to be discarded. The four universally recognized canonical Gospels, namely Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, progressively solidified their position as foundational pillars, while scores of other texts faced condemnation, deliberate concealment, or eventual oblivion. Among these deliberately excluded works were ancient texts that courageously sought to illuminate the very periods the established canon conspicuously omits. Their continued existence, whenever it miraculously occurred, was frequently precarious. A fleeting fragment quoted within a revered church father's epistle, a precious manuscript secreted away in remote desert caverns, or a persistent rumor of an ancient scroll meticulously guarded within the confines of a monastery library. The motivations behind the suppression of these alternative traditions remain a subject of scholarly inquiry. Perhaps some narratives appeared excessively bizarre, replete with accounts of a youthful Jesus miraculously striking down playmates only to resurrect them, or fashioning lifelike birds from mere clay with a spoken command. Others might have harbored subtle indications of foreign philosophical or spiritual influences, discernible echoes of Hellenic philosophy, profound Eastern wisdom, or enigmatic Egyptian mysteries. Still others presented a more overtly human portrayal of Jesus, one who demonstrably matured, acquired knowledge, and even encountered struggles, rather than depicting a figure of flawless prescience. In their fervent endeavor to safeguard a unified theological framework, the early Church Fathers may have genuinely apprehended the potential divisiveness inherent in such a rich diversity of recollections. Silence, once again, was perceived as a more prudent course of action than embracing multiplicity. The monumental discoveries of the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Nag Hammadi Library in the 20th century ignited a renewed academic fascination with these long-hidden traditions. Within ancient jars interred beneath arid desert cliffs, and within codices meticulously concealed by devout monks, erudite scholars unearthed texts that had been forgotten for millennia. The Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Philip, and the Gospel of Truth. These revelatory writings unveiled a tapestry of early Christianity far more variegated than the singular narrative preserved within the established canon. A Christianity characterized by profound mysticism, rich symbolism, secret sayings, and alternative historical perspectives. While none offered an explicit chronicle of the lost years, many subtly intimated that a significant amount of information had been deliberately withheld. It is profoundly tempting to speculate about the potential treasures that might still await discovery. Some academic whispers allude to ancient scrolls purportedly hidden within remote Himalayan monasteries, detailing Jesus' purported journey eastward. Others speak of enigmatic manuscripts purportedly sealed within the Vatican's clandestine archives, deemed too volatile for public dissemination. Whether these assertions are grounded in fact or merely constitute enduring legends, they collectively reflect a deep-seated intuition that silence is frequently enforced, rather than purely accidental. The missing years may not have been simply forgotten, but rather purposefully obscured. Envision, if you will, the scriptorium of an ancient monastery, softly illuminated by the flickering glow of oil lamps, the air redolent with the fragrant aroma of incense. A diligent scribe meticulously copies a gospel, his stylus rhythmically scratching across the delicate vellum. He pauses thoughtfully over a particular passage, momentarily uncertain whether to include it. Behind him, a venerable abbot gently shakes his head in disapproval. It is preferable to omit this. It is better to allow the silence to persist. It is wiser to safeguard the profound mystery than to unveil that which might engender confusion or division. The page is subsequently left blank, the words irretrievably lost. And with that singular decision, the very trajectory of history is irrevocably reshaped. The existence of suppressed traditions serves as a potent reminder that the historical accounts that endure are never the entirety of the narrative. Power dynamics, pervasive fear, and profound reverence all exert significant influence in shaping the archival memory of humanity. When we contemplate the unrecorded years of Jesus, we confront not merely an absence, but also a deliberate choice. Someone, at some point, made a conscious decision regarding what we would collectively remember and what we would not. The pervasive silence is not a void. It is a meticulously curated space. That's profound realization in itself evokes a subtle sense of disquiet. How much of our collective past has been intentionally expunged from memory? How many profound truths lie buried beneath the shifting sands of deserts, concealed behind the securely locked doors of ancient libraries, or languishing within the fading recollections of venerable oral traditions? The lost years of Jesus may merely represent the most renowned illustration of a more encompassing truth, that history is not solely comprised of what is openly recounted, but also of what is deliberately hidden. And so, when we encounter these suppressed traditions, we are implicitly invited to listen with heightened attentiveness, not exclusively to the words that have survived, but also to the profound silence that envelops them. For within that silence resides the faint echo of stories once told, perhaps patiently awaiting their eventual rediscovery. The protracted silence within the Gospels may not be merely an unforeseen historical happenstance, nor solely the consequence of deliberate suppression. For some, it resonates instead as a purposeful veil, a hidden season of profound preparation, during which Jesus ostensibly withdrew from the public stage of history to undergo a transformative shaping for the momentous events that lay ahead. From this perspective, the lost years are not truly lost at all. They are rather intentionally concealed, enshrouded in an aura of mystery precisely because they pertained not to public witness, but to a deeply private process of becoming. Every human life encompasses such transformative seasons, though few are overtly recognized, periods of quiet personal growth, of patient anticipation, of profound inner formation that leave scant tangible record, but fundamentally alter everything. Consider a seed germinating in darkness, a chrysalis unseen, or the hushed moments before the breaking of dawn. Perhaps the life of Jesus also contained its own hidden interlude, a crucial period when the foundational elements of his divine mission were meticulously laid, not through overt miracles, but through profound silence. Some theologians propose that this enigmatic veil serves to preserve an essential reverence. To meticulously expose every single moment of his youth would, they argue, have diminished the sublime mystery of the Incarnation, effectively reducing the divine to a mere chronological sequence of days. By intentionally leaving these formative years unspoken, the Gospels subtly impress upon us that not every aspect of Christ's life was intended for human observation. Certain profound dimensions belonged exclusively to God. Others perceive in this veil a discernible pattern of divine preparation. Moses, for instance, spent 40 years in Midian before returning to courageously lead the nation of Israel. The venerable prophets frequently retreated into the solitary wilderness prior to receiving their divine calling. Even John the Baptist emerged into public ministry only after years of profound solitude. Within this established spiritual rhythm, Jesus' hidden years fit seamlessly. A designated time apart, when seemingly ordinary days were profoundly interwoven into an extraordinary state of readiness. The silence in this interpretation may signify not neglect, but rather a sacred, holy patience. There is an inherent beauty in contemplating those years as a period of quiet, purposeful preparation. Perhaps Jesus lived a life of profound simplicity, working diligently with his hands, observing the cyclical turning of the seasons, and faithfully caring for his beloved family. Perhaps he embarked on solitary wanderings through the verdant hills, intimately learning the intricate rhythms of creation, the graceful flight of the sparrow, the steady growth of the olive tree, the abundant harvest of the vineyard. Perhaps he engaged in fervent prayer in solitude, attentively listening for the divine voice that would one day resound powerfully within him. The nature of this preparation need not have been exotic to be profoundly significant. Even the most commonplace rhythms of existence can attain a sacred dimension when lived with intentionality and deep awareness. The enigmatic veil also compels us to consider that profound transformation frequently necessitates a period of concealment, much as a seed must remain buried and hidden before it can majestically break forth from the earth. Thus, perhaps Jesus' early manhood was intentionally obscured because the time for his full revelation had not yet arrived. When he finally appeared at the Jordan River, the impact of his emergence was significantly amplified precisely because he materialized from a profound period of silence. These hidden years imbued the sudden commencement of his public ministry with an even greater striking force, akin to a brilliant flash of lightning unexpectedly illuminating a dark, foreboding sky. Imagine those years as an intricate tapestry meticulously woven in secret, each thread painstakingly placed, yet the overarching pattern deliberately hidden until the opportune moment when the veil is finally lifted. When Jesus commences his teachings, his healing miracles, and his acts of forgiveness, we witness the grand tapestry fully revealed, yet the arduous process of its weaving remains unseen. The Gospels present us with the magnificent finished work, not the lengthy and often unseen labor that preceded it. Our own individual lives, too, encompass similar hidden seasons, periods when seemingly little of consequence transpires, when our days feel ordinary, unremarkable, and largely unnoticed by the external world. Yet, within these seemingly uneventful seasons, a profound and significant preparation may be quietly unfolding. Silence does not inherently signify absence. Hiddenness does not equate to wastefulness. It may in fact signify that something unseen, yet profoundly significant, is steadily growing, patiently awaiting its designated time to emerge into the light. And so the veil of preparation transcends its historical mystery. It transforms into a poignant parable for the trajectory of our very own lives. The missing years of Jesus serve as a powerful reminder that even the most pivotal journeys contain extensive periods of quietude, during which the story is meticulously written not through public accomplishments, but through deeply personal inner transformation. The pervasive silence is not an emptiness, it is a profound state of readiness. Picture him vividly now, a young man walking contemplatively through the rolling hills at dusk, the vast sky gradually deepening into a mesmerizing violet hue, the air becoming cool with the encroaching night. He carries no sacred scrolls, performs no miracles, nor is he accompanied by any disciples. He possesses only the quiet, unwavering certainty of one who is being meticulously shaped for a destiny not yet fully revealed. The world around him does not take notice. History does not record his presence. Yet, within that profound silence, the future is already stirring with nascent potential. To contemplate the missing years of Jesus is also to vividly imagine the intricate world into which he was born. A vibrant tapestry of intersections where diverse cultures seamlessly overlapped and profound wisdom flowed freely. much like converging rivers at a fertile delta. The Mediterranean Sea was far from a closed, isolated basin. It served as a bustling gateway. Ideas, philosophies, and spiritual insights traveled effortlessly with intrepid traders, disciplined soldiers, and devout pilgrims, as surely as exotic spices and luxurious silks. Within this rich and dynamic historical context, the silence embedded within the Gospels transforms into an expansive canvas for boundless possibility. The Gospels, in their profound narrative, serve as an expansive canvas upon which the myriad possibilities of Jesus' formative years are vividly painted. It is conceivable that Jesus' upbringing was not characterized by cloistered isolation, but rather by an incessant, vibrant thrum of cultural confluence. Galilee itself represented a vital nexus, strategically positioned along prominent trade arteries that facilitated connections between Egypt and Syria, and between Judea and the sprawling Roman Empire. Its bustling townships regularly witnessed the disciplined march of Roman legionaries, the eloquent discourse of Greek philosophers, the profound teachings of Jewish rabbis, and the spirited exchanges of foreign merchants. Even in Nazareth, a locale that might initially appear somewhat secluded, the resonant echoes of distant civilizations were perpetually within earshot. The youthful individual destined to articulate profound concepts of heavenly kingdoms and earthly coinage, to draw poignant analogies from delicate lilies and bountiful harvests, may have already been instinctively absorbing the intricate rhythms of a land profoundly shaped by a multitude of linguistic traditions. Should he have ventured beyond the confines of Galilee, as certain historical traditions intimate, these intersections of culture would have become even more richly variegated. In the intellectual hub of Alexandria, he might have encountered Greek philosophical minds engaged in fervent debates concerning the essential nature of the soul, juxtaposed with Jewish scholars meticulously poring over the Torah, rendered accessible through its Greek translation. Journeying further, perhaps to Persia, he could have observed Zoroastrian fire altars ablaze, potent symbols of cosmic dualism, illuminating ancient spiritual beliefs. Along the legendary Silk Road, he might have chanced upon serene Buddhist monks, clad in their distinctive saffron robes, imparting their wisdom on the principles of compassion and liberation from suffering. Each geographical point was not merely a location, but a crucial node within an immense, intricate global network, transmitting a chorus of voices that reverberated across vast continental expanses. As one attentively considers Jesus' subsequent teachings, subtle indications of this profound interconnectedness begin to surface with striking clarity. His parables, for instance, exhibit a remarkable, almost universal intelligibility. The imagery of seeds dispersed upon disparate types of soil, of illuminating lamps concealed beneath restrictive baskets, of invaluable treasures meticulously interred within fertile fields. These narratives possess the capacity to be comprehended not solely within the specific cultural context of Judea, but within any agrarian society, within any human culture where the depths of the human heart grappled intensely with the oscillating forces of hope and apprehension. His profound declarations concerning altruistic love for one's neighbor, the imperative of mercy, the virtue of humility, and the transformative journey of inner metamorphosis resonate deeply with timeless truths articulated in far-flung, distant lands. Whether through extensive personal travel, the erudite guidance of diverse teachers, or simply through the subtle, pervasive osmosis of a profoundly multicultural global environment, Jesus' wisdom emanates a breadth that transcends the boundaries of a singular province. This inherent expansiveness is precisely what imbues his unrecorded missing years with such compelling intrigue. They introduce the captivating possibility that Jesus' spiritual and intellectual formation was not exclusively rooted in his own ancestral tradition, but was profoundly enriched by the dynamic dialogue between myriad civilizations, that he stood, whether consciously aware or not, at a pivotal historical and cultural crossroads where the philosophies and practices of the East converged with those of the West, where ancient wisdom encountered nascent perspectives. His teachings, while certainly not necessarily borrowed in their essence, may have been profoundly informed, significantly enriched, and expansively broadened by the wider, harmonious chorus of humanity's collective spiritual and intellectual heritage. One might vividly envision him positioned at such a pivotal crossroads. Dusty pathways, worn smooth by countless journeys, converge from every conceivable direction, as caravans, laden with their precious cargo, arrive from distant lands. Merchants, with practiced hands, meticulously unload their diverse wares. Exquisite ivory originating from the heart of Africa, shimmering silk woven in the distant workshops of China, and delicate glass crafted in the renowned centers of Rome. Alongside these tangible commodities, an equally rich cargo of intangible narratives arrives. Captivating tales of gods and mythical heroes, intricate descriptions of sacred rituals and complex legal codes, and profound wisdom painstakingly acquired through generations of suffering and enlightenment. A young man with an air of quiet contemplation listens intently, his gaze reflecting an insatiable curiosity, his innermost being absorbing far more than mere words. The crossroads, however, transcended its function as a mere hub of commerce. It was fundamentally a vibrant locus of profound human encounter. For us, too, the concept of the crossroads carries a deep, resonant meaning. Our identities are shaped not solely by the specific heritage we inherit, but also by the countless voices that traverse the landscapes of our individual lives. Friends, fleeting strangers, profound literary works, evocative musical compositions, all subtly or overtly become integral components of our being, even if their influence manifests only as faint, persistent whispers. The enigmatic silence encompassing Jesus' lost years may well conceal precisely such transformative encounters. Moments when profound wisdom gradually permeated his consciousness, not through a singular, dramatic revelation, but through the steady, cumulative convergence of diverse cultural streams. The profound notion of Jesus as a quintessential bridge between disparate worlds holds both historical veracity and potent symbolic resonance. Historically, it accurately mirrors the deeply interconnected reality that characterized the first century, a period of extensive global interaction. Symbolically, it serves as a powerful reminder that fundamental truth frequently emerges and crystallizes at the permeable boundaries where distinct differences meet, merge, and harmoniously mingle. The enigmatic missing years may thus represent not merely an absence of historical record, but rather the very crucible in which a message of such expansive breadth was forged, a message inherently designed to embrace and encompass the entirety of humanity. As the cloak of night descends, one can once again vividly imagine the bustling crossroads. Lanterns cast their flickering, ethereal glow, illuminating the scene as a symphony of voices softly intermingles, and countless stars begin their slow, majestic ascent into the vast, darkening firmament above. Somewhere amidst the diverse throng of weary travelers, a young man stands quietly, his presence largely unnoticed by the passing multitude, yet inwardly undergoing a profound, transformative change, influenced by the powerful cultural currents swirling around him. In that profound silence, the very trajectory of history patiently awaits its unfolding. When we contemplate the enigmatic lost years of Jesus, our minds instinctively wander to far-flung, exotic locales, to arid deserts and towering mountains, to ancient, distant temples and the teachings of foreign sages. Yet, it is entirely plausible that the profound truth of those years resides not in the exotic or the extraordinary, but rather in the profoundly ordinary, meticulously hidden in plain sight. It may have been so seamlessly interwoven into the very fabric of daily life that it left no discernible trace upon the fragile parchment of historical records. Indeed, Jesus may not have embarked on extensive travels at all. He might have lived a remarkably quiet, unassuming life in Nazareth, fulfilling the role of a carpenter's son, a brother within a modest household, and a neighbor among diligent farmers and shrewd traders. The profound silence of the Gospels regarding this period could, in fact, signify not hidden, adventurous journeys, but rather a profound, hidden simplicity. Days filled with honest labor, with the honest sweat of effort upon his brow, and with hands made resilient and calloused by the persistent engagement with tools and wood. Such a life, humble in its essence and largely unrecorded by the standards of subsequent evangelists, might not have been deemed worthy of preservation. Yet, it is entirely conceivable that this very existence served as the formative crucible for his later, transformative teachings. Consider, for instance, how a great many of his most celebrated parables draw their profound wisdom from the simplest, most fundamental rhythms of rural existence. The sower meticulously scattering seeds across both barren, rocky ground and fertile, yielding soil. The diligent shepherd tirelessly searching for a single lost sheep. The meticulous woman sweeping her humble dwelling in pursuit of a lost coin. The astute merchant relinquishing all his possessions for the singular acquisition of a pearl of immeasurable value. These vivid, tangible images, though seemingly mundane, carry the profound weight of deep spiritual truth. Yet, they are invariably drawn from the common, everyday scenes and experiences of village life. It is as if these hidden years were meticulously spent in the quiet, painstaking process of gathering these images, one by one, carefully polishing them in the crucible of silence, until they would eventually radiate with brilliant clarity in his impactful parables. Even the profound physicality inherent in his later ministry may well reflect these years of quiet, diligent labor. A skilled carpenter inherently comprehends the intrinsic strength and resilience of wood, the patient discipline required for construction, and the significant cost associated with error. He intimately understands the distinct grain of olive and cedar, the rhythmic sounds of hammer and chisel, and the enduring resilience of stone foundations. Later, when Jesus eloquently spoke of houses meticulously constructed upon solid rock, or precariously upon shifting sand, or of yokes crafted to be easy and burdens designed to be light, he was, perhaps, drawing directly upon profound lessons first learned and internalized within the confines of the family workshop. To perceive his lost years in this particular light is to understand them not as a period of absence, but rather as a profound presence, an immersive engagement with the ordinary lived experience of his people. Concealed in plain sight, he lived precisely as they lived, toiled as they toiled, and endured suffering as they suffered. His teachings, when they finally emerged, bore the indelible stamp of shared human experience. He did not articulate his wisdom from a position of lofty detachment, but rather from the grounded, empathetic wisdom of one who had intimately lived among them. There is also an undeniable mystery embedded within the very ordinariness of this perspective. If the Son of God truly walked the earth, it is profoundly striking that he did so for decades without any public spectacle, without any widespread recognition. His neighbors may have known him solely as a quiet, unassuming craftsman, nothing more. Perhaps they passed him daily in the bustling marketplace, never once suspecting that the individual destined to fundamentally alter the course of human history stood quietly beside them, completely unnoticed. The profound silence of the Gospels regarding this period may thus reflect this very anonymity, the divine essence meticulously hidden in plain sight, patiently awaiting its appointed hour. This particular notion carries with it both a profound sense of humility and an awe-inspiring wonder. How frequently do we, in our hurried lives, inadvertently overlook the sacred simply because it presents itself cloaked in the guise of the ordinary? How often do we diligently seek profound revelations in distant, exotic locales, while simultaneously ignoring the quiet, profound wisdom that blossoms unassumingly within the fabric of our own daily lives? The hidden years serve as a potent reminder that true greatness is frequently nurtured and prepared in obscurity, that the extraordinary can often grow, unnoticed, within the fertile soil of the ordinary. Picture modest homes, constructed from durable stone and clay. Olive groves, their leaves shimmering with a silvery luminescence in the gentle breeze. Children's joyous laughter echoing through narrow, winding lanes. In a small, unassuming workshop, a young man meticulously bends over a piece of wood, shaping it with careful, deliberate hands. His countenance is serene, his movements steady and purposeful. No one meticulously records his name. No one specifically marks the passing day. And yet, in that profound, unassuming silence, the very course of history is being meticulously prepared. The lost years may not necessitate grand, distant journeys to fully explain their transformative power. Perhaps they require only this: a life lived quietly, fully, and attentively within the ordinary rhythmic pulse of a village. Hidden in plain sight, the eventual teacher of eternity was, in essence, learning from the dust of the earth, from the honest sweat of labor, and from the simple yet profound pulse of human life itself. There exists yet another compelling interpretation for the silence surrounding Jesus' lost years, one that deliberately eschews the quest for hidden journeys or supposedly suppressed manuscripts. Instead, this perspective treats the very absence of detail as an intentional, symbolic myth. In this particular view, the significant gap in the historical record is not an accidental oversight of history, but rather a deliberate symbolic space, a profound parable intricately woven into the very structural framework of the Gospels themselves. The missing years, therefore, transmute into a type of sacred metaphor, conveying through their very silence what cannot be adequately communicated through mere words. Ancient traditions of storytelling frequently employed strategic silence, and an aura of mystery as literary devices to elevate a central figure beyond the realm of the ordinary. Heroes in these narratives were sometimes born amidst wondrous circumstances, only to subsequently vanish from the recorded narrative until their dramatic reemergence, fully formed and prepared for their destiny. This narrative pattern inherently emphasizes the concept of destiny rather than gradual development, and divine revelation rather than an observable human process of growth. To meticulously depict the transformation of the boy into the man would, in essence, humanize the story, making it more relatable. However, to deliberately leave this profound transformation, shrouded in mystery, casts an unmistakable aura of the miraculous over the entire narrative. The silence in this context articulates a powerful message. Here is an individual whose authority and being derive not from human preparation or earthly tutelage, but from an intrinsic, divine mystery. For certain scholars, the missing years function precisely in this manner. They are perceived as a potent literary device, a calculated narrative pause that dramatically magnifies the sudden, powerful eruption of Jesus' public ministry. When Jesus steps into the waters of the Jordan River at approximately 30 years of age, the deliberate absence of preceding biographical detail significantly heightens the dramatic impact of this pivotal moment. He emerges not as an individual gradually shaped by discernible experiences, but rather as one who seemingly arrives from beyond, carrying an inherent authority that appears to spring forth from an ethereal, unidentifiable source. The mythic quality of the missing years thus serves to powerfully underscore his profound otherness, his intrinsic mystery, and ultimately, his divine essence. Yet, it is crucial to understand that myth, in this ancient context, does not equate to falsehood. In the ancient world, myth functioned as a profound vehicle for conveying truths that were deeper and more resonant than mere factual accuracy. A mythic silence can, in fact, speak more profoundly and eloquently than a literal, exhaustive historical record. By deliberately erasing the intervening years, the Gospels may be subtly directing our attention toward a reality that transcends mere chronological progression. That what truly mattered was not the specific manner in which Jesus acquired knowledge or wisdom, but rather the fundamental essence of who he inherently was. The hidden years in this interpretation implicitly convey that his profound authority does not originate from any earthly teacher or institution, but springs directly from the eternal. He was not merely a student of earthly instructors, but a recipient of eternal wisdom. Nevertheless, the mere prevalence of tales regarding his journeys suggests an inherent human need to bridge informational gaps. The enigmatic void of his silent years proved too potent, too evocative for people to ignore. For some, it sparked theories of extensive expeditions to the east. For others, it implied a clandestine tutelage among esoteric practitioners. Yet, it is conceivable that the Gospels deliberately omitted such biographical minutiae. Perhaps their very reticence constituted a purposeful narrative choice. These unrecorded years serve as a poignant reminder that Jesus transcended mere biographical data and historical chronology. He embodied an inscrutable enigma, his existence not simply lived, but supernaturally revealed. This particular perspective encourages a profound sense of tranquility. The narrative's deliberate silence transforms into an unspoken pulse, akin to the quiet intervals between heartbeats, more profoundly felt than articulated. It compels us to confront the inexplicable, to find solace in the profound realization that not every inquiry possesses a definitive answer. Occasionally, the very absence of information serves as its own profound response. The Gospels can be likened to a masterfully executed painting, where negative space is intentionally employed. The central figure is meticulously rendered, yet the backdrop remains deliberately unpainted. This emptiness serves to direct our perception, intensely sharpening our focus on what truly holds significance. The lost years function precisely as this evocative blankness. They underscore that the narrative of Jesus is not a continuum of exhaustive particulars, but rather a sequence of divinely chosen revelations. In this context, the myth of the missing years imparts a crucial lesson in humility. Our innate desire is to comprehend everything, to fill every void with comprehensive explanations. However, true wisdom sometimes emanates not from an abundance of words, but from their scarcity. The unarticulated aspects invite profound wonder, deep reverence, and imaginative contemplation. Let the profound quietude of those unrecorded years envelop us like a gentle lullaby. It is not an emptiness to be dreaded, but an enigma to be tenderly embraced. It serves as a powerful reminder that even within the interstices, even amidst the unknown, the divine presence persists. The missing years, much like myth itself, are not designed to satiate mere curiosity, but rather to ignite a sense of profound awe. When one contemplates the prolonged silence enveloping Jesus' formative years, an unsettling hypothesis emerges: that these years were not simply forgotten or left undocumented, but rather intentionally shrouded in secrecy. The nascent Christian church may have strategically employed silence as a protective barrier, safeguarding information it deemed too sensitive to disclose, deliberately concealing details that could potentially destabilize nascent faith. History, it is often observed, is significantly shaped by what remains unsaid. Ecclesiastical councils and diligent scribes meticulously determined which gospel accounts would attain canonical status, which teachings would be hallowed, and which narratives would be summarily rejected. Had Jesus' unrecorded years encompassed encounters with diverse spiritual traditions, had he pursued studies under foreign mentors, or had he articulated concepts that blurred conventional theological boundaries, such particulars might have been perceived as excessively perilous to preserve. Admitting these details could potentially diminish the assertion of his divine uniqueness, suggesting that Christ's wisdom was not entirely inherent, but partially assimilated. Even in contemporary times, persistent whispers allude to concealed archives, scrolls sequestered within monastic libraries, manuscripts deeply entombed within the Vatican's vaults, and fragmented texts that subtly hint at extensive journeys far beyond the geographical confines of Judea. While most scholars readily dismiss such claims as mere folklore or elaborate conspiracy theories, their very persistence underscores a pervasive intuition that something significant has been deliberately withheld. The silence feels profoundly intentional, as though a deliberate decision was made long ago that a collective forgetting would prove more advantageous than active remembrance. One might envision the early custodians of Christian doctrine, gathered in dimly lit chambers during the nascent centuries. A scribe meticulously unrolls an ancient scroll, its script faded yet still decipherable, narrating an account of the young Jesus engaging in studies among esoteric foreign mystics. The assembled elders exchange uneasy glances. Such a narrative, they might reason, could sow confusion among the faithful, blurring the critical distinction between divinely ordained revelation and mere human intellectual pursuit. One by one, they express their dissent. The scroll is then set aside, its contents never to be replicated, its memory deliberately allowed to dissipate into oblivion. In this context, secrecy effectively transmutes into a form of preservation. To conceptualize the missing years in this manner is to confront the disquieting possibility that historical narratives are meticulously curated, not solely through serendipitous accidents, but through calculated intent. Silence, in certain instances, functions as a formidable barrier erected not to safeguard truth, but to protect established power structures. The precise nature of what lies concealed behind this barrier may forever elude discovery. Nevertheless, the very existence of the barrier itself conveys a profound message, that at some point, a deliberate choice was made to guard, to withhold, and to seal away certain information. This particular possibility elicits a complex blend of apprehension and wonder. If secrets were indeed meticulously maintained, it serves as a stark reminder of the inherent fragility of human memory and the effortless manner in which narratives can be sculpted by those who wield the instruments of documentation. Simultaneously, it reaffirms the enduring nature of mystery, demonstrating its capacity to persist even in the face of suppression. A narrative guarded with excessive zeal often transforms into a legend, whispered furtively in hidden corners, transmitted across generations like a smoldering ember, carried through profound darkness. Perhaps this is precisely why the notion of secrecy clings so tenaciously to the lost years. The prevailing silence feels less like an absence and more like a deliberate concealment, as if beneath the ostensibly straightforward surface of the Gospels, a deeper, more intricate current flows. While we may never fully penetrate this veil, the very act of pondering its existence draws us closer to the heart of the enigma. Imagine a venerable library from antiquity, its shelves laden with countless scrolls. Fine dust motes dance within the shafts of sunlight piercing the gloom. Conceivably, somewhere within its confines, lies a manuscript capable of unraveling the enigma of those 18 years. Yet, it remains undiscovered, locked away in an intentional secrecy, its words gradually fading even as they are painstakingly preserved. We are unable to access them. We cannot. Nevertheless, their silence reverberates, echoing across millennia, serving as a powerful testament to the notion that what remains hidden can sometimes possess as much potency as what is openly revealed. Within the profound quietude that envelops Jesus' unrecorded years, narratives frequently gravitate towards the evocative image of hidden manuscripts, scrolls meticulously penned and subsequently lost, ancient codices interred and forgotten, parchments patiently awaiting discovery beneath accumulated layers of dust and stone. The sheer concept itself exerts a dreamlike allure, as though somewhere within a secluded library or a sealed grotto, the definitive answer to the enigma of those 18 years still resides, inscribed in ink, patiently awaiting its eventual unearthing. The annals of history are replete with such remarkable recoveries. The Dead Sea Scrolls, serendipitously unearthed within the caves of Qumran, dramatically unveiled a rich tapestry of Jewish intellectual thought contemporaneous with Jesus. Hymns, legal codes, and prophetic texts preserved in profound silence for nearly 2 millennia. The Nag Hammadi Library, discovered in Egypt in 1945, presented a diverse chorus of forgotten Christian voices, including Gospels, Revelations, and mystical aphorisms, meticulously concealed by monks who feared their imminent destruction. If such caches of ancient writings could endure centuries without detection, why should others, still awaiting discovery, not similarly exist? Some proponents assert that monasteries nestled in Tibet, India, or Egypt possess manuscripts that directly recount Jesus' extensive wanderings in the East. 19th-century travelers reported hearing monastic scholars recite from scrolls detailing a revered teacher named Isa, who journeyed from Israel to acquire and impart wisdom before ultimately returning to his homeland. Academic opinion remains sharply divided. Some scholars interpret these accounts as pure fabrication, while others discern fragments of ancient oral traditions embellished with mythical elements. Yet, even the most resolute skeptics cannot deny the profound resonance of the possibility that a written testimony exists somewhere, capable of bridging the enigmatic chasm between the child and the man, between Nazareth and the Jordan. Even within Western scholarship, whispers persist regarding sealed archives. The Vatican Library, with its seemingly endless labyrinthine corridors and securely locked chambers, is frequently envisioned as a veritable vault of such profound secrets. Texts deemed too delicate, too perilous, or too contentious for public dissemination. Whether this perception aligns with factual reality or remains mere fiction is less significant than what it symbolizes: the pervasive intuition that silence does not always equate to emptiness, but often signifies deliberate concealment. That forgotten manuscripts might harbor truths intentionally obscured, truths considered too disruptive for established orthodoxy. Imagine for a fleeting moment the extraordinary experience of unexpectedly encountering such a text. A fragile scroll, its edges delicately crumbling, its ink faded to a faint brown hue. You meticulously unroll it, and there, nestled between lines of ancient Greek or Aramaic script, are words describing an epic journey, a profound teacher, a transformative vision. Perhaps it speaks of Jesus in meditative discourse with ancient sages in India. Perhaps it recounts Jesus traversing desolate deserts alongside enigmatic mystics. Or perhaps it simply portrays Jesus laboring quietly in a humble Galilean workshop, his profound wisdom gradually maturing in profound solitude. Irrespective of the specific details, the mere existence of such a manuscript would irrevocably transform our understanding, not only of his life, but of history itself. Yet a profound paradox emerges. Even if such writings were indeed discovered, would their authenticity be universally accepted? Or would they too be summarily dismissed as apocryphal, as mere fables concocted to fill an inconvenient void? The very intensity of our yearning for definitive answers renders us inherently suspicious of every potential solution presented. The silence is so profoundly ingrained that any voice attempting to pierce it sounds inherently uncertain, fragile, and perpetually contested. The evocative image of forgotten manuscripts thus transcends its literal meaning, becoming a powerful symbol. Regardless of their actual existence, they serve as a potent reminder of the inherent fragility of memory and the frequent manner in which truth remains hidden, patiently awaiting revelation within profound silence. They also remind us, with equal potency, that history is never a completed narrative, that beneath the familiar words we currently possess, countless layers of untold stories may still lie dormant. Imagine a monastery perched majestically high in the mountains. Snow gently blankets its ancient roof. The wind howls mournfully against its stoic stone walls. Inside, a solitary monk moves deliberately by candlelight, carefully unlocking an old wooden chest. Within, scrolls meticulously bound in cloth lie undisturbed, unread for centuries. He pauses, lifts one with tender reverence, and begins to decipher its ancient script. Outside, the night deepens into an impenetrable darkness. Inside, a voice long silenced stirs once more, dramatically breaking the profound quietude. Perhaps such manuscripts will never be found, or perhaps they already exist, patiently biding their time, hidden in plain sight, until the world is finally prepared to receive their message. Until that moment arrives, they endure as an integral part of the perennial mystery, the forgotten manuscripts of Jesus' lost years, haunting the pervasive silence with their profound potential. As Christianity firmly established itself and began its expansive propagation generations following Jesus' earthly demise, a distinct cohort of spiritual seekers emerged, choosing the untamed wilderness as their spiritual refuge. These individuals, known as the Desert Fathers and Mothers, intentionally retreated into the stark, austere landscapes of Egypt, Syria, and Palestine, deliberately forsaking urban conveniences and material comforts to dwell in secluded caves, rudimentary huts, and solitary monastic cells. Their quest was not for diversion, but for profound stillness, not for earthly authority, but for spiritual purity. And within their collected aphorisms and fragmented teachings, a peculiar resonance persists, subtle indications that certain profound mysteries are perhaps best left unarticulated. The profound enigma surrounding untold narratives suggests that certain mysteries are best left unarticulated. The Desert Fathers, inheritors of an ancient lineage potentially extending back to the undisclosed period of Jesus' early life, held a profound conviction that the stark desert environment purified the soul, stripping away illusions and revealing unvarnished truth. They perceived it as a crucible of trials and temptations, yet also a wellspring of profound insights. For these ascetics, silence was not a void, but a plenitude, an expansive realm where the divine presence could be intimately perceived, unadulterated by the interference of human discourse. Their narratives were not meticulously crafted gospels, but rather fragmented whispers, cryptic, incomplete, and inherently resistant to definitive interpretation. Within this venerable tradition, certain ascetics alluded vaguely to Jesus' veiled years, refraining from explicit storytelling, but instead hinting at profundities deemed too perilous, too sacrosanct, or too readily misconstrued for open dissemination. In their deliberate reticence, one discerns a mirroring of the gospel's own lacunae, an emphatic insistence that what truly held significance was not to be verbally expressed, but rather to be profoundly experienced and lived. A profound aphorism, traditionally ascribed to the Desert Fathers, declares, "If you possess words, you have not yet achieved silence. If you are not silent, you do not yet perceive." Could this enigmatic statement serve as their implicit elucidation for the absent chapters of Jesus' existence? Perhaps the essence of his formative preparation resided precisely in silence itself, in the rigorous discipline of obscurity, in the meticulous cultivation of a heart exquisitely attuned to the divine. Envision a youthful Jesus venturing into the untamed wilderness, much like the prophets of old. Days seamlessly transform into weeks, the sun relentlessly searing by day, the celestial tapestry of stars piercing the nocturnal veil. He quenches his thirst from meager springs, subsists on the scant provisions the land reluctantly yields, and, most profoundly, he attunes himself to the murmuring wind sweeping across ancient stones, to the resonant voice within, to the profound silence that imparts wisdom without the necessity of utterance. This is not a historical account amenable to empirical verification, but rather a profound rhythm that the Desert Fathers would have intuitively recognized. For they, too, steadfastly believed that silence possessed the transformative power to sculpt the very contours of the soul. Centuries subsequent, when these devoted ascetics retreated into the desert's embrace, they may have been consciously or subconsciously reenacting the archetypal pattern of those unrecorded years. Their lives became living parables of withdrawal and subsequent return, of profound hiddenness and illuminating revelation. While they bequeathed no chronicles detailing Jesus' youth, their very existence implicitly suggested a deep, intuitive understanding. Some truths, it seems, remain unrecorded, not due to oversight, but because they are inherently inexpressible, experienced solely within the sanctuary of silence. This contemplative insight imparts a subtle yet profound lesson. The unchronicled years may pertain less to geographical peregrinations, where Jesus journeyed, what academic pursuits he undertook, and more to an internal metamorphosis, how silence meticulously prepared him, how obscurity profoundly refined his spirit. The Desert Fathers serve as a poignant reminder that the most profound mysteries are frequently wordless, and that sometimes what remains unrevealed possesses a far greater potency than what is explicitly communicated. As dusk descends upon a desert cave, a monk sits cross-legged within the encroaching gloom, uttering no sound, his attention solely fixed on the rhythmic cadence of his own heartbeat. Beyond the cave's entrance, the wind whispers across the undulating sands, carrying with it the very same profound silence that once enveloped Jesus' unrecorded years. This silence is not an absence. It is a palpable presence, a hidden and profound presence, deeper than any utterance, more enduring than any historical record. Perhaps the Desert Fathers deliberately refrained from speaking plainly of the lost years because they perceived them not as an enigma demanding resolution, but as an exemplary model to be emulated. To embrace a life of silence is to embrace the inherent mystery. To relinquish the need for words is to step into the embrace of truth. In this profound manner, the silence woven into the Gospels and the silence pervading the desert converge, coalescing into a singular, resonant echo. That which remains hidden may, in fact, be more sacred than that which is overtly revealed. For a span approaching 2 millennia, the undisclosed years of Jesus' life have persistently captivated the intellects of scholars. Historians, theologians, and spiritual seekers alike have meticulously scrutinized fragmented evidence, harboring the aspiration of assembling these pieces into a cohesive and comprehensive narrative. Yet, the intricate puzzle has steadfastly defied resolution. The constituent elements do exist, scattered across apocryphal gospels, medieval legends, enduring oral traditions, and faint archaeological murmurs. However, when scholars endeavor to interlink these disparate fragments, the complete picture invariably fails to coalesce with definitive clarity. Certain scholars underscore the weight of historical silence, positing that the very absence of corroborating evidence inherently suggests that Jesus likely lived a tranquil existence in Nazareth, plying his trade as a carpenter, attracting no discernible attention until his baptism by John the Baptist. Within this interpretive framework, the missing years are not imbued with any mystique, but are rather deemed prosaic, their silence merely reflecting a life too ordinary to warrant chronicling. For these academics, to postulate extensive travels to India, Britain, or more distant lands is to indulge in fanciful myth-making. The solution to the puzzle, they contend, is that there is, in fact, no puzzle whatsoever. Conversely, other researchers highlight tantalizing clues that resist such straightforward interpretations. They note the striking authority with which Jesus imparted his teachings, the profound universality embedded within his parables, and the resonant echoes of his aphorisms with wisdom traditions far predating and extending beyond Judea. These scholars propose that such intellectual depth does not spontaneously manifest in isolation, but must reflect an exposure to broader currents of philosophical thought. Here, the missing years transform into an alluring canvas upon which to project a myriad of possibilities. Rigorous Essene training, immersion in Egyptian mysteries, engagement with Indian philosophies, or participation in the cosmopolitan intellectual exchanges facilitated by the Silk Road. A third group, however, navigates a middle course, suggesting that Jesus did not necessitate extensive travel to encounter the accumulated wisdom of the world. Galilee itself, strategically positioned on vital trade routes, inherently exposed him to a diverse array of foreign voices and innovative ideas. A young man who possessed keen listening skills and an observant gaze could have absorbed the rich tapestry of global diversity without ever venturing from his familial home. In this perspective, the puzzle is resolved not through arduous distant journeys, but through profound local immersion within a vibrant crossroads of cultures. Finally, there are those who contend that the silence itself is a deliberate act, asserting that the Gospels intentionally conceal more than they reveal. They propose that early church leaders may have possessed knowledge of stories pertaining to Jesus' youth, but judiciously chose not to preserve them, fearing potential confusion or theological controversy. For these scholars, the enigma resides not in an absence of information, but in a calculated suppression, a meticulously veiled hidden history. Each of these perspectives commands its own proponents, and each carries a certain intellectual weight. Nevertheless, none can lay claim to definitive finality. The extant evidence remains too sparse, too contradictory. The puzzle persists, perhaps inherently unsolvable, and perhaps that very irresolution constitutes its truest essence. Not a problem demanding completion, but a profound mystery inviting contemplative engagement. Imagine a dedicated scholar toiling at his desk late into the night, ensconced amidst towering stacks of weighty tomes and ancient manuscripts. Candles flicker low, casting dancing shadows, and parchment crackles softly beneath his discerning fingertips. He painstakingly cross-references fragments of text, meticulously compares various translations, and diligently notes parallels between the profound sayings attributed to Jesus and the wisdom articulated by distant sages. His mind strains, striving to meticulously fit the disparate pieces together. Yet the overarching picture consistently eludes definitive formation. The silence residing between the fragments resonates with a greater volume than the fragments themselves. This very scholarly struggle in its essence constitutes an integral component of the overarching narrative. It powerfully illustrates the enduring nature of mystery, even when subjected to the most piercing illumination of human reason. The intractable puzzle of the lost years has steadfastly resisted every concerted attempt to unravel it, serving as a profound reminder that the intricate tapestry of history is not reducible to mere mathematical equations, and that the profound essence of faith cannot be compressed into a rigid chronological framework. The lacunae remain stubbornly present, eloquently silent, immovably persistent, and perhaps that very persistence is the fundamental point. The puzzle does not demand a definitive solution, but rather invites a profound coexistence, an acceptance that what remains missing may perpetually elude discovery, a recognition that the silence itself imparts a profound lesson in humility. The scholar's intellectual conundrum thus transcends being a mere portal to certainty, transforming instead into a poignant reminder of inherent limitations. Some chapters of human history are inscribed not with conventional ink, but with the indelible script of mystery. Dispersed fragments, scattered across a table, never quite interlock perfectly, irrespective of their painstaking arrangement. Yet, collectively, they subtly intimate the existence of something far grander than the mere sum of their individual parts. They whisper of a narrative expansive beyond the confines of words, of years veiled yet powerfully influential, of a silence that perpetually continues to resonate and speak. To entertain the notion that Jesus might have journeyed beyond the confines of Judea, assimilating knowledge from foreign sages or absorbing profound wisdom from diverse traditions, is to tentatively approach a conceptual boundary that many within the ecclesiastical hierarchy have assiduously guarded for centuries. Orthodoxy adamantly insists upon an inherent uniqueness, upon the foundational premise that Christ's teachings emanated not from a syncretic blending of disparate cultures, but solely from an unequivocal divine revelation. To concede any substantial influence from Egypt, India, or Persia would be to implicitly suggest that his authoritative stature was not entirely transcendent, but partially human, derived from experiential encounters, borrowed from esteemed teachers, and shaped by the very world he ostensibly came to redeem. For countless centuries, such suggestions were met with profound suspicion and outright condemnation. The ecumenical councils responsible for establishing the biblical canon rigorously emphasized unity and doctrinal purity, assiduously striving to safeguard the nascent faith from perceived delusion and heterodoxy. Jesus was to be exclusively revered as the Son of God, not as a peripatetic seeker who meticulously assembled fragments of truth gleaned from various lands. To assert otherwise was to perilously risk unraveling the very fabric of established belief. The profound silence embedded within the Gospels thus served the interests of orthodoxy remarkably well. By leaving those formative years conspicuously blank, the narrative effectively preserved a sacred mystery without inadvertently inviting contentious questions that possessed the potential to fracture the nascent faith. Yet subtle hints stubbornly persisted. The apocryphal Gospels, the legendary accounts of Isa, and the whispered rumors of hidden manuscripts all persistently tugged at the protective veil, subtly suggesting that perhaps the missing years encompassed far more than mere holy obscurity. Scholars who courageously dared to explore such possibilities frequently found themselves branded as heretics, their intellectual works condemned, and their dissenting voices effectively silenced. Orthodoxy demanded an unyielding certainty. Speculative inquiry was deemed far too perilous. Even in contemporary times, the proposition that Jesus' profound teachings might reflect discernible parallels with Eastern philosophies continues to disquiet many devout believers. To draw comparisons between his pronouncements and, for instance, Buddhist compassion or Hindu concepts of unity is perceived by some as diminishing his inherent divinity. Yet for others, such striking parallels serve to deepen the profound mystery rather than to attenuate it. They suggest that divine truth may, in fact, be far more expansive than the confines of any single tradition, and that Christ's intrinsic wisdom could resonate so universally, precisely, because it harmonized with fundamental truths already subtly whispered in myriad tongues across diverse cultures. This inherent tension between rigid orthodoxy and intellectual openness largely defines the ongoing discourse surrounding the lost years. For the vigilant guardians of established tradition, the silence must remain inviolate, a sacred mystery impervious to external intrusion. Conversely, for seekers and mystics, this very silence is an enticing invitation, a door deliberately left ajar, beckoning profound exploration. Each faction harbors deep apprehension regarding the potential consequences of the other's perspective. One fears the fragmentation of cherished faith, the other fears the stagnation of essential wonder. Imagine an early council of bishops, convened in dimly lit, candle-lit halls, earnestly deliberating which sacred stories to meticulously preserve. Upon the venerable table lies a scroll, purportedly describing Jesus' periods of study in foreign lands. Certain voices earnestly advocate for its inclusion, noting how it vividly portrays a Christ actively engaged with the broader world. Others, however, gravely shake their heads, issuing solemn warnings that such narratives would only serve to confuse the faithful, implicitly suggesting that salvation is not solely a divine prerogative. In the end, the scroll is reverently set aside, destined to gradually fade into obscurity and silence. Orthodoxy ultimately triumphs, not by furnishing definitive answers, but by meticulously ensuring that challenging questions remain unarticulated. And yet, despite these efforts, the profound questions persist. They resurface in every successive generation, in every courageous scholar who dares to inquire, in those who discern distinct echoes of Eastern wisdom within the profound utterances emanating from Galilee. Orthodoxy may diligently guard the sacred silence, but it possesses no power to eradicate the inherent human longing for deeper understanding. The lost years thus remain a quiet yet persistent challenge, continuously pressing against the carefully constructed boundaries of absolute certainty. This inherent tension, in its very essence, constitutes an integral part of the mystery's enduring allure. Faith and doubt, sacred tradition and unbridled imagination, meticulous preservation and intrepid exploration, all converge and intertwine within the profound silence of those 18 enigmatic years. The challenge to traditional religious interpretations extends beyond mere historical analysis. It delves into the fundamental human approach to the unknown. It confronts individuals with a pivotal choice: to seal off the gates and preserve the sanctity of the unexplained, or to throw them wide open, embracing the inherent risk of transformation. The profound silence, perceived not as an empty void, but as a vibrant, energized space, resonates with persistent inquiries that refuse to be quelled. Established doctrines have consistently striven to stabilize this fluidity, yet, much like an uncontainable wind, it persistently shifts, murmurs, and beckons. Perhaps the true essence of this challenge lies not in abandoning deeply held beliefs, but in fostering an environment where faith and the enigmatic can coexist and flourish harmoniously. when the quietude surrounding Jesus's undocumented years is reinterpreted not as a void, but as a period of intense personal formation, a novel perspective emerges. That these concealed 18 years may have constituted a comprehensive, albeit unwritten, curriculum, a prolonged and contemplative education, meticulously preparing him for the monumental mission that lay ahead. This was an instructional journey extending far beyond the confines of academic scrolls and formal classrooms, delving instead into the profound, practical teachings inherent in existence itself. These invaluable lessons were imparted by the diverse individuals he encountered, the ever-changing landscapes he traversed, and the steady, unobtrusive passage of time. Certain ancient traditions envision him assimilating knowledge from revered sages, esoteric mystics, and venerable priests in distant, exotic lands. Conversely, other narratives depict him deeply rooted within the familiar rhythms of Nazareth, his character sculpted by the dynamics of family life and the rigors of manual labor. Regardless of the specific setting, these unrecorded years collectively transmute into a veritable academy of concealed wisdom, where the ultimate instructor of eternity was, for a time, himself a dedicated student. His subsequent parables, characterized by their striking simplicity and profound depth, bear the unmistakable imprint of lived experience, as if every evocative image had been meticulously absorbed in quiet contemplation long before it was ever articulated. One might reflect on the frequency with which his utterances draw inspiration from the natural world. The effortless flight of birds, the delicate beauty of field lilies, or the humble mustard seed that burgeons into a sheltering haven for multitudes. Such vivid imagery is not gleaned from written texts. It is meticulously gathered from countless hours of patient observation, of profound and attentive noticing. The hidden years, therefore, may have been replete with such discerning attention, serving as an intensive training in perceiving the divine immanent within the seemingly ordinary. Furthermore, there existed the unacknowledged curriculum of manual labor. The meticulous craft of carpentry, for instance, demands a unique blend of patience, unwavering precision, and sustained endurance. It instills an intrinsic understanding of the inherent strength of various materials, the invaluable efficacy of steady hands, and the critical necessity of constructing enduring foundations. Later, when Jesus articulated concepts such as yokes made easy or dwellings securely built upon solid rock, it is plausible that he was not merely employing rhetorical metaphor, but rather drawing directly from deeply embedded, lived memories. His spiritual authority, therefore, was arguably shaped, in part, by the rigorous discipline of physical exertion. Additionally, one must consider the profound curriculum of suffering. Life in Galilee during that era was far from devoid of hardship. Pervasive poverty, the oppressive weight of Roman occupation, and widespread social unrest exerted immense pressure on the daily lives of its inhabitants. If Jesus indeed lived quietly among his community, he would have undoubtedly witnessed systemic injustice firsthand, felt the poignant struggles of the economically disadvantaged, and shared intimately in the myriad burdens of common existence. Consequently, when he later proclaimed tidings of hope for the impoverished, liberation for the subjugated, and solace for the weary, his pronouncements resonated with an authentic, lived compassion, rather than being mere abstract theoretical constructs. To conceptualize these lost years in this manner is to perceive them not as blank, empty pages, but as a profound period of covert preparation. The very silence itself, becomes an integral component of the lesson. That genuine sagacity is not invariably transmitted through grand spectacle, but rather through the quiet virtues of patience, diligent effort, and focused attention. This hidden curriculum molded not only his spoken words, but also his fundamental mode of being, rendering him grounded, deeply empathetic, and exquisitely attuned to both the earthly realm and the eternal. One might vividly envision him positioned at the periphery of a verdant field, observing with quiet intensity as a farmer meticulously broadcasts seed. Or picture him diligently repairing a fractured yoke, his hands steady and adept, his mind wholly engrossed in the task. Imagine him listening with profound empathy to the lamentations of his neighbors, to the unrestrained laughter of children at play, or to the earnest theological debates among the elders within the synagogue. These fleeting moments, though never formally documented, undoubtedly became an intrinsic part of his very essence. They meticulously shaped the distinctive voice that would one day summon disciples and forged the expansive heart that would ultimately embrace an entire world. This particular perspective carries a gentle yet profound truth, that humanity's own periods of quietude, those seasons characterized by waiting, by obscurity, or by the steady cadence of ordinary tasks, may similarly constitute an unseen formative curriculum. The silences encountered in individual lives may not signify emptiness, but rather a potent, transformative force, subtly shaping destinies in ways not immediately discernible. The unrecorded years of Jesus serve as a poignant reminder that the most profound and essential preparations frequently unfold unnoticed, concealed within the fabric of plain sight, patiently awaiting their destined moment of revelation. The humble workshop, the sun-drenched hillside, the bustling marketplace. None of these settings appear inherently extraordinary. Yet, it is precisely within these unassuming, everyday moments that a hidden curriculum meticulously unravels, intricately weaving together threads of patience, profound compassion, and enduring wisdom. When Jesus eventually stepped into the public arena, he carried within him the invaluable lessons gleaned from silence, the resilient strength forged through labor, and the expansive vision born of observing the world with an open, unshielded gaze. The missing years, therefore, may be interpreted less as an enigmatic puzzle to be solved, and more as a powerful reminder that even silence functions as a teacher, and that seasons of quiet obscurity can prepare individuals for truths far grander than they can currently conceive. The historical lacuna surrounding Jesus' undocumented years has perpetually served as fertile ground for human imagination. Within this expansive, imaginative realm, civilizations situated far beyond the geographical confines of Judea have asserted claims of echoing his presence. In India, for instance, extant oral traditions speak of a revered holy man from the western lands, affectionately remembered as Isa, who is said to have undertaken studies among local sages before ultimately returning to his homeland. In ancient Persia, fragmented pieces of local lore suggest the passage of a traveling spiritual figure whose teachings resonated deeply with the Zoroastrian philosophical dualities of light and darkness. Even within Britain, venerable medieval legends recount a youthful Jesus journeying alongside Joseph of Arimathea, his footsteps reportedly gracing the verdant hills of Glastonbury. While such narratives might strike contemporary sensibilities as purely fanciful, they nonetheless unveil a more profound underlying truth, a universal human yearning to connect the narrative of Jesus' life with the rich tapestry of heritage from myriad lands. Each civilization, perceiving the timeless resonance of his voice across epochs, intuitively imagines that he might once have trodden their ancestral soil, and that their indigenous wisdom might have played a role in shaping his formative path. The very silence of those 18 years thus functions as an open, resonant chamber, amplifying the tantalizing possibility of shared spiritual roots across humanity. When his subsequent teachings are subjected to comparative analysis with the established wisdom traditions of other cultures, notable parallels unequivocally emerge. His profound pronouncements concerning humility, for example, strikingly echo the Buddhist exhortations to transcend the ego and relinquish the self. His unequivocal command to love one's neighbor resonates deeply with the foundational Confucian ideals of societal harmony and reciprocal respect. Furthermore, his conception of an indwelling divine presence within humanity mirrors the profound Hindu teachings regarding the eternal and immanent soul. The critical inquiry then arises: were these striking similarities the direct result of personal, cross-cultural contact, or do they represent universal truths that arose independently across diverse civilizations? The historical silence offers no definitive answer, providing only the captivating and intriguing possibility of interconnected spiritual pathways. What remains unequivocally clear is that Jesus' message possessed an inherent universality, enabling its profound reception across a vast spectrum of languages, cultures, and historical epochs. Perhaps this intrinsic quality explains why echoes of his transformative presence appear so widely across civilizations. Not necessarily because he physically journeyed to these distant lands, but rather because his profound words resonated harmoniously with pre-existing wisdom already flourishing there. Much like a musical chord struck on one string can induce sympathetic vibrations in another, his voice seemingly activated and amplified ancient truths wherever they were discovered. Nevertheless, an alternative and equally compelling possibility exists: that these widespread echoes are more than mere coincidences, that the annals of history, despite their gaps, preserve subtle, faint traces of actual encounters that in the present day remain impossible to definitively substantiate. Ancient caravans regularly traversed continents, forging vital links between disparate regions. Merchants, acting as unwitting cultural conduits, transported not only valuable goods, but also a rich tapestry of stories and ideas, while earnest seekers of wisdom frequently embarked on arduous journeys across vast distances in their relentless pursuit of truth. Within such a dynamic and interconnected ancient world, it is not at all inconceivable that the young Jesus might have ventured far more extensively than the gospel narratives explicitly record, inadvertently leaving behind whispers that, over time, gradually coalesced into enduring legends. One might vividly imagine him embarking on a protracted journey, the dust of ancient roads rising beneath his feet, towering mountain ranges looming majestically in the distant horizon, and the cacophony of unfamiliar foreign tongues spoken all around him. Picture a wise teacher pausing along his path to greet him, offering a profound word, a poignant parable, or a transformative vision. The young seeker, attentive and receptive, absorbs these insights, carries them within him, and continues his journey. Later, in another distant land, those who encountered him might recall not his specific name, but rather his compelling presence, his inquisitive nature, or his quiet, intrinsic authority. Over the passage of centuries, these nascent memories gradually transmute into legend, and legend, in turn, evolves into a lingering echo. These very echoes form an integral part of the grand symphony of mystery. They serve as a powerful reminder that truth is not circumscribed by geographical boundaries, that wisdom transcends cultural divides, and that silence itself possesses the profound capacity to carry sound as effectively as it denotes absence. Whether Jesus genuinely walked upon the soil of India, Persia, or Britain may forever remain an unanswerable question. But the pervasive echoes across civilizations compellingly suggest that his life narrative cannot be confined to a single geographical locale. His story, much like his universal message, inherently belongs to the entire world. Consider the intricate map of the ancient world. Lines of trade and sacred pilgrimage crisscross formidable deserts, vast seas, and towering mountain ranges. Along these ancient pathways, myriad voices travel, some distinctly human, others seemingly divine. Among them, perhaps, walked a young man whose physical footsteps left no enduring record, yet whose profound echoes persist, carried across civilizations like a timeless whisper through the annals of history. What profound insights do the missing years of Jesus impart to humanity, if not the invaluable lesson of obscurity? For nearly 2 decades of his earthly existence, the historical record remains entirely silent. No miraculous deeds are recounted. No sermons are meticulously transcribed. No extensive journeys are meticulously detailed. There is only a profound silence, stretching across 18 years like a concealed valley nestled between 2 prominent, historically visible peaks. And yet, perhaps, it is precisely within this very obscurity that humanity discovers the most enduring and transformative wisdom. True greatness frequently blossoms unseen. Seeds, for instance, meticulously push their roots deep into the fertile soil long before their nascent leaves break through the surface. Mighty rivers carve unseen channels beneath the earth's crust before they finally emerge into the daylight. So too might the life of Jesus have unfolded. A period of concealed growth meticulously preparing the way for a sudden and profound revelation. The Gospels abruptly transition from his childhood to his adult baptism, leaving observers to ponder what transpired during that quiet, intervening period. The answer, perhaps, is elegantly simple. He was actively living, patiently waiting, profoundly deepening his character, all while remaining unseen. Obscurity is not a state of emptiness or inaction. It is rather the slow and steady accumulation of inner strength, the patient and deliberate shaping of character, and the quiet, profound absorption of the world's intricate tapestry. Within the crucible of obscurity, a soul cultivates endurance, profound humility, and expansive compassion. These are not lessons that can be rushed into existence, nor can they be effectively taught through public spectacle. They are forged only within the unnoticed hours of ordinary, everyday existence. When Jesus finally stepped into the waters of the Jordan, he carried with him not merely divine revelation, but also the rich, accumulated fruit of years lived in contemplative silence. For individuals, this lesson is gentle, yet immensely profound. Their own periods of quietude, those extended stretches of life when nothing overtly remarkable appears to transpire, may equally constitute vital seasons of preparation. Times spent in obscurity are far from wasted. They are subtly shaping individuals in ways that remain unseen, ensuring that when the moment of their calling inevitably arrives, they too may discover that these hidden years have meticulously provided them with precisely what is required. The obscurity of Jesus' youth also speaks volumes about the inherent humility of the divine. If the Son of God truly embraced a life of silence for nearly 2 decades, then obscurity itself is thereby sanctified. It implies no failure to remain unnoticed, no shame in being hidden from public view. The ordinary becomes holy. The unrecorded attains precious significance. A divine being who consciously chose obscurity implicitly chose also to affirm the intrinsic worth of every human life lived beyond the transient glare of history's spotlight. Consider Nazareth, its tranquil lanes, its modest homes, its surrounding fields, and its bustling workshops. And imagine a young man walking there day after day, diligently laboring, listening intently, and constantly learning. No one meticulously records his words. No one specifically marks his days. Yet, it is precisely within that profound obscurity that the world's most enduring and transformative voice is being meticulously prepared. This reflection serves as a heartfelt invitation to find solace and rest. If an individual's life feels inconspicuous, if their days appear ordinary and unremarkable, they are reminded that obscurity is not an absence of meaning. It is, rather, a rigorous classroom for cultivating patience, a refining crucible for forging strength, and a hidden, inexhaustible wellspring of wisdom. The silence of the Gospels regarding these years may be interpreted less as a historical gap and more as a profound gift, gently reminding humanity that obscurity can possess its own quiet and sacred holiness. The hidden years, therefore, are not an enigma to be unraveled, but rather a profound lesson to be received. The timeless lesson that true greatness germinates and flourishes in silence, that the unnoticed aspects of life hold immense significance, that the most powerful and impactful lives are often meticulously prepared in quiet anonymity, and that sometimes the unwritten chapters are ultimately the ones that most profoundly shape the entire narrative. The quietude surrounding Jesus' undocumented years transcends mere piqued interest. It fundamentally redefines the very essence of spiritual conviction. For those who embrace the teachings, the Gospels are not simply historical chronicles, but rather sacred attestations meticulously crafted to unveil transcendental truths, extending far beyond the confines of temporal events. Nevertheless, the substantial 18-year chasm serves as a potent reminder that authentic faith is not predicated upon exhaustive, granular detail, but rather upon an unwavering trust in those foundational elements specifically chosen to endure through the ages. This very void, in its profound emptiness, constitutes an inherent trial of faith, compelling individuals to ponder whether they can accept ambiguity and the unknown as integral components of the hallowed narrative. Should Jesus, in fact, have embarked upon extensive travels to distant lands, assimilating diverse spiritual insights from various traditions, then faith itself broadens its scope to perceive the divine's intricate handiwork interwoven through a multiplicity of cultures, rather than being strictly confined to a singular lineage. The celestial message thus transmutes from a solitary utterance into a majestic harmony, orchestrating a symphonic resonance that reverberates across disparate civilizations. Such an expansive perspective possesses the capacity to deepen profound reverence, eloquently demonstrating that God's truth is not circumscribed, but rather universally accessible. Yet, it simultaneously introduces a measure of disquietude, for it subtly blurs the established demarcations that traditional doctrines have long rigorously upheld. Conversely, if Jesus instead pursued an unassuming existence, dwelling quietly in Nazareth, shrouded in relative obscurity, faith is then challenged in an altogether different manner. It demands that adherents believe the Son of God lived for several decades as an ordinary individual, largely unnoticed, his profound significance uncelebrated. This perspective posits that divine essence can reside within the commonplace, that an inherent holiness can adopt the unassuming guise of everyday life. This particular vision consecrates the mundane, impressing upon believers that the sacred is not exclusively discovered in miraculous occurrences, but equally in quiet contemplation, diligent labor, and steadfast patience. And if these missing years were, by deliberate design, suppressed or concealed, faith then confronts an even more incisive query. Can the ecclesiastical authority, with all its human judgments and periods of silence, still be fully relied upon to transmit the unadulterated truth? For some, this unsettling possibility erodes foundational confidence. For others, it paradoxically sharpens it, imparting the wisdom that the core essence of the message cannot be entirely contained by any singular institution, but rather perseveres even in the face of concerted suppression. Each of these speculative scenarios carries its own distinct implications, its own unique restructuring of spiritual conviction. To embrace them is not to relinquish belief, but rather to permit belief to evolve into a more malleable, more expansive, and more receptive posture toward the unknown. Faith thus becomes less about definitive certainty and more about profound trust, less about absolute possession of knowledge and more about profound wonder. These contemplations beckon a serene openness. Faith need not recoil from the profound quietude of the lost years. It can, in fact, welcome the inherent mystery as an intrinsic thread within its very fabric, serving as a powerful reminder that truth is far more immense than mere linguistic expressions, far vaster than historical records. Faith thrives not by meticulously unraveling every enigma, but by courageously advancing, even when the immediate path ahead appears shrouded in dimness. A beacon carried through the inky blackness of night does not utterly banish the encroaching darkness, but it unerringly illuminates the way, step by careful step. So too does faith navigate through the labyrinth of mystery. The missing years may forever remain beyond direct observation, yet the illuminating radiance of their implications continues to provide guidance. Whether they obscure epic journeys or profound moments of quiet reflection, institutional suppression or humble obscurity, they serve to remind us that the narrative of Jesus is not solely concluded upon ancient parchment. It finds its ultimate completion within the very heart of faith, where mystery itself is imbued with sanctity. Let that inner luminosity persist within one's spirit. It does not furnish an explanation for the pervasive silence, but it renders that silence endurable, transforming it from a void into a meaningful space. It serves as a poignant reminder that faith is not synonymous with absolute certainty, but rather an unwavering reliance upon that which steadfastly endures, even when the historical record is conspicuously incomplete. At the culmination of all diligent inquiry, of all meticulous speculation, of all careful tracing through ancient legends and scriptural texts, one singular element undeniably persists: silence. The undocumented years of Jesus remain elusive, and perhaps they are destined to forever elude definitive discovery. The canonical Gospels conspicuously leave these years unrecorded. Esteemed scholars engage in ceaseless debate concerning their nature. Gifted storytellers artfully weave them into elaborate narratives of far-flung travels and wondrous encounters. Yet, the unvarnished truth, if such a truth could ever be indelibly etched upon a physical page, remains resolutely unspoken. This profound quietude, however, is far from empty. It has, over countless centuries, captivated the human imagination, drawing pilgrims, mystics, historians, and dreamers alike into its compelling orbit. The absent years serve as a powerful testament that historical accounts are never truly exhaustive. Sacred biographies, replete with their divine dimensions, cannot be fully confined within the limited scope of parchment alone. What remains unarticulated often possesses a potency and resonance equal to, if not greater than, what is explicitly declared. The very absence itself thus becomes an organic component of the overarching narrative, profoundly influencing how one listens, how one contemplates, and how one ultimately believes. In this nuanced manner, the missing years function less as a mere void and more as an introspective mirror. Each successive generation projects into this enigmatic expanse that which it most deeply yearns for. A universal sage bridging the wisdom of the Orient and the Occident, a humble artisan sanctifying the dignity of obscurity, or a reclusive mystic whose profound insights are safeguarded by an impenetrable veil of secrecy. The pervasive silence subtly conforms to the contours of human questioning, reflecting back not definitive answers, but profound yearning. And yet, there resides a gentle, almost profound wisdom in allowing the silence to remain unbroken. For if every minute detail were known, if every single year were meticulously recorded, the inherent mystery would inevitably dissipate. The lost years, in their very elusiveness, instruct humanity to coexist with unknowing, to embrace faith not as a proprietary possession of knowledge, but as an act of profound trust. They serve as an enduring reminder that even within the lacuna, profound meaning steadfastly abides. An initial disquietude may arise, but one subsequently realizes that this missing chapter profoundly alters the interpretation of the entire narrative. The observer lingers contemplatively over the words that do remain, meticulously scrutinizing the silences interspersed between them, allowing the imagination to roam freely through the uncharted territories. This very absence has organically integrated itself into the fabric of the story, shaping its essence from within. Such is precisely the case with the biographical account of Jesus. For the contemplative individual, this culminating reflection endures. That which remains unarticulated may possess a sacredness equal to, if not surpassing, that which is explicitly voiced. The profound quietude of the lost years is not a deficiency, but rather an intrinsic characteristic, serving as an eloquent reminder that truth frequently conceals itself in the penumbra, patiently awaiting discovery, yet never permitting complete apprehension. The concealed years represent a compelling summons to engage in profound contemplation, to embark upon a quest for understanding, and to find solace within the enigmatic. One might close one's gaze and permit the profound stillness to envelop the senses. This is not a silence indicative of emptiness, but rather one imbued with profound depth, palpable presence, and the resonance of hidden truths, poised just beyond immediate grasp. Somewhere within that profound quietude, perhaps lies the unspoken chronicle of 18 years. Yet it is equally plausible that this narrative was never intended for revelation. Perhaps its ultimate purpose was always to persist in an aura of mystery, guiding humanity not through the rigid confines of certainty, but through the boundless expanse of wonder. The profound impetus for many significant human endeavors is not merely a question of why, rooted in pragmatic concerns or a calculated pursuit of advantage. Instead, the enduring motivation frequently springs from a deep-seated sensation of wonder. This intrinsic fascination, an insatiable curiosity about the unknown, or an awestruck appreciation for the intricate fabric of existence, serves as the true catalyst. It transcends the simple why of utility or necessity, pushing individuals and societies forward not by the dictates of immediate gain or survival, but by an almost primal urge to comprehend, to explore, and to marvel at the mysteries that envelop our world.